Ahoy, my name's Alex and I run this YouTube channel. How's it poppin'? A couple years ago, I decided to play through all 3 of the Dragon Age games. My memories of Origins and 2 were strong. I got really into them. Nothing's perfect, but there was enough where I could easily connect. Inquisition is more of a haze, odd considering my playtime was double of the former titles combined. In creating this series of videos, I was looking forward to playing through them again. The 3rd game is the one I dreaded, because Dragon Age Inquisition is complicated. On one hand, it's a wonderful expansion of the setting, its ambitions, creating highs I find so easy to get swept up in with its narrative complexity. On the other hand, it's a role-playing game where I don't care much for the game part, the kind where I find it more fun to talk about than to actually sit down and play, flip-flopping my perspective on it depending on the day. It's both great and also off. So this video is meant to get across my thoughts on this title, re-examine my opinions and come to a better articulated perspective. And naturally, making this video on a public site, you're more than welcome to tag along for the ride and share your thoughts at any point. I also want to preface, I will be including the DLCs in this video, The Descent, Jaws of Hakkon, and the finale, Trespasser. With that said, I've delayed long enough. Enjoy. In the year 940 of the Dragon Age, Divine Justinia V hosts peace talks at the Temple of Sacred Ashes between the Mage Rebellion and the Templars splintered from the Chantry. Here's one of the coolest aspects right in the premise. If this is the first Dragon Age game someone picks up, that intro paragraph is a confusing barrage of words with no significance. For anyone who played this series, the story beat is the good stuff, the logical world progression after the 2nd game. The most important character in Dragon Age isn't the hero Ferelden, however great they are, nor Varric, Morrigan, or even the player character in this game. It's the continent of Thedas, this land of multiple kingdoms with ever-shifting political complexity. Take or lay, the French-inspired land in the southwest, focused on duty, honor, and plenty of skeletons in the gilded closets of the most noble houses. Once seen as an invading threat to the Fereldans, now a key power player. The relationships between the factions and land shift, adding to the complexity of the world. An example pertaining to this case would be Anders at the end of Dragon Age 2. Blowing up the Kirkwall Chantry was a rallying cry for the mages, adding fuel to the already established conflict that has boiled over in this game. As Hawk, you got an intimate perspective. Now in Inquisition, we see how the world carries on after these events. This sounds like general stuff in a series, of course events happen after others, but it's in this dedication to the ever-shifting perspective throughout the games, the hero of Ferelden, Hawk, and now the Inquisitor, that makes this evolution special. The protagonist will swap, but Thedas will be with you, changed by the effects of those within it. Having these negotiations take place at the Temple of Sacred Ashes is a subtle example. Once the goal to cure Aurel Emond, now repurposed to mend the conflict tearing the world apart. But now our player character is brought to the stage. Depending on race, the character's last name will be Levelian if Elf, Kadash if Dwarven, Adar if Qunari, and for this recorded playthrough, Hartwig of House Trevelyan, the lone survivor now bearing the mark to close the fade rifts across the sky. Assisted by Seeker Cassandra Pentagast, Varric, and Apostate Solus, the player is now called by the title the Herald of Andraste, the woman known as the Bride of the Maker, a figure so revered the belief in her teachings is the chant of light, spread across the land and the dominant religion of Thedas. Ferelden and Orlais both believe it, though each has different interpretations of her will and history. That title is a big deal in this world, yet it's one that leads to heavy scrutiny. For those who believe your work is of divine influence, others wield the heavy skepticism. What if this is an elaborate trick, an act of circumstance, or vie for power? That latter accusation is important, as the explosion led to the Divine's death, tearing open the sky and unleashing demons across the world, all with no suspects for the cause. Thus, with this world-ending threat, those closest to the Divine reformed the Inquisition. Back in the day, the Order was used to protect the world from the brink of chaos, and now it arises again. Fix the hole in the sky and punish those responsible. This is the founding concept of Dragon Age Inquisition. I find this to be a very strong beginning. It gives agency, expanding the complexity of scope by trying to forge alliances and support with the world on fire, demons running amok, and even Templar and Mage threats still continuing. It justifies the continent-trotting adventure, and it provides the player an interesting question to think on. And thus brings me to the player character, the Inquisitor. Being real with you here, I'm not a big fan. I'll admit I had my attachments, in particular the version of my first completed playthrough, Inquisitor Akkad Adar. The Qunari mage who used lightning magic and necromancy was awesome, but it was much like my attachment to my Final Fantasy XIV character. Not for what was represented in the game, rather the mental work when the game was off. Imagining how they would talk, their personality, their motivations, that kind of stuff. In contrast with my version of the Grey Warden and Hawk. In Origins, I bought into my City Elf rogue Fox Tabris through the game. He wasn't the most diplomatic, oftentimes his blade spoke the loudest. That stemmed from his time growing up in the alien ages and having to fight to protect his own. And at the end of the prologue, when he couldn't save his cousin from a horrible situation, that haunted him through his quest. And when the game called back to that incident at the Temple of Sacred Ashes, and his companions offered kind words, even Morrigan, that was such a good moment. While minor, it got me to believe Fox is his own character. Or my recent Dragon Age 2 playthrough with a Mage Hawk, the older brother who was the calm, diplomatic type trying to hold his family together, losing his composure when Carver contracted the taint in the Deep Roads. As the years pass, he adopted a more flippant attitude to cope with Kirkwall's ever-diminishing order. I can understand the frustration of the dialogue wheel in that game, but because of this framing as a singular character, I think it works. Each personality option, a possibility with the life Hawk lived. It's just which one you had him act on. Both of these characters I could connect with. It highlights one of my favorite things about this type of game, playing a role, embodying a character, and picking choices that make sense to them. It gets you to ask a fun question, not what's the optimal solution, instead, what would my character do? So Origins lets you make a character of one of 6 different backgrounds that allowed multiple interpretations. Dragon Age 2 had a set backstory and established voice with differences depending on class and attitude. Inquisition went with a mix of both, and it's my least favorite execution because of it. I can see what they were going for, taking the personal established parts of Hawk and combining Origins' freedom of player races and having the best of both worlds. But because of that, I don't find the Inquisitor to be very interesting. Because my character was voiced, that limited the amount of options my guy would have in conversations. Oftentimes, the way a line would be delivered would contrast with my interpretations of it. The tone is conveyed by a picture in the dialogue wheel, but a lot had a branch icon in its place. The conversation would continue, but how the line was delivered would be unknown until spoken. To where I'd often go, "Oh man, I didn't mean it like that." The times where my Inquisitor would speak without prompt were often neutral responses, asking questions, and it got me to think of them not as a character with a unique perspective, but as a vehicle to embody this viewing of the world. The game does have options for racial-based dialogue, characters will mention it too, and there are word table operations relating to it. I would have loved to see more of that stuff. It's just so disconnected you need to keep an eye out for it, rather than as a natural extension like Origins. I get the development perspective of handling dialogue options like this, but I don't click with it. I could be a Qunari mercenary, a Dalish elf, a lyrium smuggler dwarf, or a human noble, and the character will respond to information the exact same way. It's a section where I see Inquisition's scope hurting the game. By having the Inquisitor as a defined character, but also a customized creation in their origin, it gets the general point across but fuzzy on any real connection to the world. The most unique dialogue is unlocked by perks or previously stated attitudes. I find the Inquisitor, much like the general public, the symbol and what it represents more alluring than the person underneath. Because the symbol offers 2 interesting questions. The first is, what do you think of your station as the Herald of Andraste? Being the chosen one isn't an opportunity most are given, it's in the name after all, and the game will often ask you to weigh in. Whether to the masses or an intimate conversation with a friend, was it truly divine intervention that put you here or circumstance? As the player, you can express that answer, speak with conviction of your purpose, or question it yourself. Others will make up their mind about you regardless, but you're given a voice to articulate that interpretation. Eventually, you will understand the specifics that caused it in more detail, but the question of the maker's influence is still wonderfully vague after that. Ultimately, it comes down to faith. What do you believe, and where is that faith placed? The maker has been established as a foundation of the setting in past games. If the role-playing works for you, it's a question that can tie your character to the world. What is their conviction on the matter? An even more interesting question if you're playing a non-human Inquisitor. The Dalish have a belief in the elven gods, the Qunari in the Qun, the dwarves in the stone. The player can make the equally valid choice to reject this calling, denounce their title to anyone they meet. Yet the game keeps it open enough that the player could roll with this title if chosen. I recall the Qunari background having you born outside of the Qun. Accepting the maker's teachings could be a possibility. For this playthrough, I decided to embrace the title of Herald. One, to see how the game would respond to my declaration and challenge me for it, and the second is more of a personal aspect. Belief is powerful. It can weather the hardest turmoils, and I say this not just as a religious sense. Whether one believes in a higher power or not is a personal question always up to them. I speak of conviction, of placing one's faith in something when there is no certainty in the outcome. That could be a person, a purpose, one's own self, anything. The gamble to open your heart to care when there is no logical reason to, and it could just as easily be crushed. Whether the maker is real or not is an interesting ponder, but what is real are the people who believe in him. That justification has been used for evil acts throughout Thedas' history, but also brought people together when the world was falling apart. On my first playthrough, I was skeptical. I couldn't say one way or another with certainty, but whether my character was or wasn't, the belief in that possibility brought individuals together to save the world. Others put that intention first because that's what it needed. Corners came together for a cause that gave hope. When the breach was torn across the sky this second time, I accepted the role. This Inquisitor would be the herald the people could believe in. Even if the attempt doesn't reach the Maker, it'll certainly shoot farther than if we never aimed at all. This leads us into the second question for the Inquisitor. Okay, herald or skeptic, will you learn from the past or repeat it? The word Inquisition has a foot in reality with a negative connotation. My go-to mental jump point is the Spanish Inquisition and the unfortunate discovery it wasn't just a Mighty Python sketch. The Inquisition was a part of the Catholic Church in the 12th century that would investigate and punish those deemed as heretics. The same name isn't a coincidence. Art is often strengthened by imbuing human experience and history into its world building. In Thedas, the original Inquisition formed after the First Blight to protect the world from uncontrolled powers like blood magic, abominations, cult of the old gods, and of course, heretics. The Chant of Light was praised and forced under the world in the name of righteousness. A character met early on, Mother Giselle, mentions this history, while including when the world was set to right, they sheathed their swords. The mission had served its purpose, disbanding and becoming the new organization, the Templars. The senior members became the Seekers of Truth. This legacy is placed on your shoulders. As the figurehead of the organization, you'll be tasked to handle the conflicts of the continent. The intention is to end the chaos and punish those responsible. How will you lead this new Inquisition? That is the foundation for most of the game's choices. This approach is a more complicated situation than the Grey Wardens. The mission was to stop the Blight at all costs. Approach that mission as you see fit. As a faction that was apolitical, the wants and desires of kingdoms were to be avoided. Consequences for such things were shown in the Origin DLC Soldier's Peak. The hero of Ferelden's choices with the Throne of Denerim was an outlier that was necessary for the mission. For the Inquisition, maintaining the politics of the kingdoms is half the battle. Killing demons can only do so much without alliances keeping things running smoothly despite the circumstances. But for now, in the early stages of this rebrand, there's still a wound in the sky secreting demons like pus. Assistance from the mages and Templars seems unlikely. Most of the world treats the group with suspicion as we're hunkered down in the small village haven of the Frostback Mountains. Cassandra, Varric, Solus, strap on those hiking boots. Let's get some fresh air. The first moments stepping back into the hinterlands were a strange combination of feelings. The immediate one was nostalgia. I've forgotten how beautiful Inquisition zones are. With the game expanding the world's scope, the brown, ash-covered city of Kirkwall is catching some Z's, and up to bat are regions that vary in climates. This location is more subdued compared to the others, yet it's got its charm. The various plant life, the green and red trees creating an interesting visual palette, rocks causing uneven terrain, boulders spread across, and fields peppered throughout show agriculture that once flowed through. Hold on, I gotta grab this iron. The enemies are rebel mages and Templars, now fighting in skirmishes across the map. With the game treating this as the first enemies conveys both the makeshift aspect of it, the minor combatants indicate a lack of proper military coordination, small frag types, but also the lingering effects of this conflict and how it prevails even when people are caught in the middle. Excuse me, I hear Stem of Elfroot calling like red lyrium. But what about the people, taken from their homes, now gathered in the crossroads? Some even joined a cult in the southwest, rejecting the Chant of Light, not out of the message, but because mortal lips could never do the Maker justice. So they prepare for when he takes them back to the Golden City. Speaking of taking, this shard looks like a good keepsake. Oh yeah, that's right. It's on my knees as the tally of collected shards appears that the second feeling awkwardly pairs with the nostalgia. Dissatisfaction. Inquisition is an open world game. Chances are, if you're watching this, you know that term, but just in case you don't, think a game with a big map that encourages exploration or a sandbox-like approach to fun. Depending on the game, that's going to vary. A standard tactic is placing plenty of activities to make use of the map's scale, often called checklisting for how numerical this approach is. Dragon Age Inquisition uses this approach. The currency to progress the main story in optional zones is power. The more the Inquisition spreads, the more is accrued. This is a mechanical push to do quests, close fade rifts, set up camps, and filling out requisitions. Most of these are tracked with numerical bars. Rifts function identically besides the types of demons that spawn. Fight a series of waves, then close the rift and grab the drop for completion. For the first couple, the visuals and sound effects might do something for you like it did for me, but eventually it's the same song and dance. Banishing demons becomes mundane. Camps are straightforward. Walk up to a spot, press the button, and voila! A new checkpoint to fast travel and restock potions. Requisitions use materials you've gathered to get power, narratively described as miscellaneous items for the Inquisition. Quests are a mixed bag. A lot are quite standard, like talk to this person, mark 3 locations on the map, clear out this fort, etc. A fresh memory was Varric lugging Bianca across fields and rocks to gather 10 slabs of ram's meat. Besides the tasks, it's also how the quests are presented that makes them feel standard. When talking with people, the camera zooms in and characters will default pose speaking with you. The Inquisitor follows suit, the NPC mentions a problem, and the conversation ends with a new quest. While this approach does make a lot of practical sense in allowing plenty of tasks or people to talk to, it contributes to a sameness in presentation. Unless it's a story cutscene, this is the most of your engagement with other people, and it takes the role-playing hook out of conversations. There are moments you can have a companion's input or control the attitude, but I find myself picking choices that are more mechanically rewarded than expression, because there are not much there in most scenes. Combine this approach of activities and interactions with a slew of collectibles constantly progressing through each region, landmarks found, shards collected, constellations formed, along with others like bottles of Thetis, mosaics, and ones I actually really think are wicked, songs that can be played at local taverns. There's also high dragons, but let's hold off at these low levels. No need to lose the flesh off our bones just yet. And I forgot the sheer amount of crouching and bending over your character does to pick up plants and ores. I sure hope Hartwig has the armor legs upgrade that support his knees, because I had this compulsion to grab anything highlighted in my path. A cave with a plot crucial character? Wait your turn, sir. I gotta grab this nature's bounty of obsidian and deep mushrooms first. This is pretty consistent with the regions, and the hinterlands in particular is quite infamous in that regard. I've got 2 pieces to argue this case. One is more intellectual, then paired with my own subjective experience. While preparing for this video, I reread Jason Schreier's fantastic book Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, offering a behind the scenes on some popular games at the time. One featured was Dragon Age Inquisition, and a lot of the info gave great context for the game. To paraphrase, the development for Inquisition was on nightmare difficulty. After the mixed reception of Dragon Age 2, BioWare felt a lot to prove with their next project. With their engine Eclipse falling behind compared to their ambitions, they decided to use the Frostbite engine created by the EA-owned company DICE, known for the Battlefield series. It looked really good and could lead to collaborations if BioWare started using it for all future titles. Unfortunately, Frostbite didn't work well with RPG parameters. On the visual front, it was packing, but it led the team to manually create systems to make it function. Combined with the game's ambitious scope led to a troubled but ultimately successful development. I bring this up because right at the tail end of the piece, Schreier mentions that difficult development can be felt in the hinterlands. Most of the tasks in there are, as executive producer Mark Dara put it, garbage quests. Things to do for the sake of doing them, not on par with the world-saving goals of the main quest. With how the zone presents itself, icons on the map with no immediate exit besides opening the world map or traveling far south, it could lead players to a completionist approach to activities before progressing, prevalent enough that posts are written and even Schreier mentions in an article to please, for the love of the maker, leave the hinterlands. A plea that would have assisted my teenage self, donned in the most powerful gear the Inquisition could forge, locking eyes with a sheet of parchment encouraging a Druffalo recovery on the other side of a canyon. I gathered shards with a childlike glee of picking rocks to skip across the water, and I remained oblivious to my companion's pleas to progress as we backtracked through the same forest from 2 hours ago.
We must have done enough to draw the attention of the clerics by now. Shouldn't we meet with them?
But Solus, what about the farmers and those dreaded wolves? The mind is a fickle mistress in what it chooses to remember. I couldn't tell you all the states in my own country or who our third president was, but I sure can remember my playtime in the hinterlands was over 8 hours on my first playthrough before leaving. I actually dropped the game pretty soon after that. What got me was that novelty of constant progression, doing a quest here, grabbing a collectible there, stopping by a landmark like a new food joint, working my brain's plasticity lining up those constellations, and what do you mean 30 minutes have passed? But now that hit isn't the same. My priorities in games have changed. Open worlds aren't really my go-to anymore. Yeah, they're beautiful, and I'll have some fun trudging up and down those cliffs while my companions talk amongst themselves, but the bars going up aren't doing it for me anymore. Especially when most isn't tied to the narrative stuff. Take the shards. Besides offering elemental resistances, there's not much of a story reason to collect them, and I'm not planning on hunting down those bottles either. If they're in the area, I'm not going to ignore them out of spite, but I won't be combing through the regions to obtain a local brew. I don't even get a sip. What's funny is how a lot of those attitudes about the game's bloated nature, like the constant busy work, is most prevalent right here at the start. Explore somewhere else and the quest will be drastically cut down, smaller in activities, yet more visually interesting, such as my favorite region in the entire game, if not favorite location in the series, the Storm's Coast. This place kicks so much ass. I am a sucker for coastal regions. I loved it in the show Midnight Mass, and I love it here. As the waves crash into the rocks and the seagulls sound off, the rain continues its never-ending pour. The wind howls as a fog traces across the sky. The greens of the vegetation are even more pronounced with extra water. Seeing this stuff even years later, I can understand the excitement to embrace new technology. Hindsight will always reveal places for improvement. I'm not a big fan of how the hair looks. It's too shiny, like my character's face is covered in a bright plastic. But in these environments, the Frostbite engine delivers. I get why the team was excited to use it. The way the waves form in the distance is incredible. If I was standing there in real life, I might just risk swimming out there to see if the waves would carry me to land like a shell on the beach. My companions would question their faith in their herald, but I'd be thriving out there. But not so much to draw the attention of the giant and dragons dueling further down the shore. The open world has me the most excited when the regions pose intrigue, often through the zone's main questline. With the coasts, there are these dwarven tunnels that suggest a history long ago. The initial hook to come here was a lead on some wardens. Perhaps these forgotten paths lead to some darkspawn waiting to strike? And then you can stumble upon the quest involving the Blades of Caesarion and challenge their leader, giving an agent for the Inquisition. If you watch this video and play Inquisition, definitely take it at your own pace. As for myself, I didn't initially look for collectibles, did most of the region quests that sounded cool, shouted to Crestwood for being a standout, slowly weaned off my compulsion to pick every plant or ore within searching distance, and found myself enjoying the game more when I was very conscious about which activities I did and would discard. Like going to a buffet and picking a plate of General Tso's chicken, some crab ragoons, a donut, and ignoring the rest. Taking it slow seems to be Inquisition's attitude as well. It's a meaty game with 10 areas, not including the DLCs. This was my initial reason for wanting to stall this project with the classic "I'll get around to it eventually" tactic. It's a slow burn title that sinks its hooks in the further you get. Not just gaining power, not just from finishing quests, regions, or main story, but also in the details. You can create your own weapons and armor, pick the materials they're forged in, and give cool nicknames to christen them for battle. You can customize your version of Skyhold, from the Throne of Judgment, the stained glass windows filtering light, banners, and even the bed. And then there's the big one, the mechanic that is both incredibly cool and also frustrating: the war table. Thedas is a big place, and the Inquisition is looking to prove its influence. Spread across the kingdoms of Orlais and Ferelden are missions that need doing, alliances to forge, and conflicts to wrap up. It functions like a choose-your-own-adventure in a sense. Missions will give a background on a problem, and you pick out of your 3 advisors' actions. Josephine is a diplomat, so her options lean towards using favors while respecting honors and titles. Liliana is a spy master, covert operations type that uses rumors to get a point across, or a well-cloaked dagger if a problem calls for it. Cullen is the general. If there's a battle or need stratagems, he's your guy. The missions have different outcomes depending on which advisor's plans you enact, offering different rewards upon completion. While the bonuses are cool, my favorite aspect is how it contextualizes your Inquisitor as a leader. You weigh the options and pick the one you find ideal. It's a mechanical example that you're calling the shots. The Inquisitor is not just a cool title, it's a responsibility to delegate experts to deal with problems. I found engaging with the war table operations to be some of the most immersive role-playing bits of the game, like partaking in a complicated game of chess as pieces move across the board. I didn't think what rewards I'd get, but rather what options made the most sense with the situation. How do I deal with my noble relatives using the organization for a name drop of legitimacy? How should we deal with the traitor in the organization? There are rumors of Maleficarum, how best to proceed. Who should win the war of succession of an Orlesian noble house? This is done through text, but it expands the goings-on of the kingdoms. It's not static. Problems occur constantly, some tied to your world state and choices from previous games. Even companions will have requests for the table, and while the game paints you out to be a hero by the public, some choices can lead to moral complexity. I made some calls that didn't always pan out and people got hurt. The detached nature, viewing the pieces on the map and the documents summarizing outcomes gives an impression of cold calculations. Sometimes it works out, sometimes not. Learn from what you can and move on. And this leads to an annoying part, the timer. Whenever you send an advisor out, a clock counts down until they finish, giving a pop-up. The problem arises, it's not an in-game measurement, it's relating to the real world. I can send Liliana out to investigate rumors and she'll be indisposed for nearly an hour of real time, and I can't overbook. Advisors can only do one task per order. I assume this was done to encourage players to keep a casual mindset. You may have 20 minutes to hear back from Josephine, maybe explore the open world, chat with companions, or continue the main story, and that would create a sense of time progressing. But that's not how I did it. I approached it like using Duolingo or Pokemon Go. Log in, book it to where the magic happens, input my tasks like I'm doing dailies, then log off. I found the timer to unnecessarily extend my playtime, much like a lot of the open world activities, manually starting and stopping so I could get to the stuff I was interested in, which ironically made me lose excitement for the war table, especially frustrating when tied to companion quest lines or gaining affinity. I remember doing the usual routine and audibly gasped when seeing a mission that would take over 20 hours. I also have a slight nitpick here. I wish the advisors returning didn't give a notification during a cutscene. It's really distracting. The organization was fending off invaders in a big story moment. Cullen is issuing commands, keeping everyone in line, and he's so good at his job that while fighting for my life, I get an update saying he's ready to report. I really liked the idea of the war table and did enjoy it, but the timer is a really annoying part. I played the game without mods to give a fair assessment of Inquisition, but if I were to play it again, mods that drastically cut down war table times or remove them sounds pretty great. What's also great is the dual aspect of the Inquisition. While maintaining order is the priority, possibly repeating the effects of the last version, you get a first-hand account on how it's forming under more hopeful aspirations, offering a chance at reinvention. It started in Haven. I was speaking with the quartermaster Theron and how she once served Loghain, loyal even to this day, sent here by the new king of Ferelden to provide service, or the blacksmith Harriet, hailing from the once populated Lothering. These two characters aren't key players, but they show how this scrappy organization can allow others whose paths are darkened or dishonored to be a part of a common good, or take the main advisors of the organization. The militaristic arm Cullen has had it pretty rough, all things considered, a Templar surviving horrific events of the Mage Uprising in the Ferelden Tower and a Ground Zero in Kirkwall. What I find so interesting about Cullen is his growth through the series. In those previous games, he was pro-Templar, demanding the right of annulment in Origins and assisting the Knight Commander during 2, but those final moments in the sequel changed him. While he understood the dangers of magic, even willing to tell a spellcasting hawk directly to his face, mages aren't like you or I. The possibility their role could be abused wasn't apparent until Meredith demanded the champion's death. That's when the disillusionment happened. Anyone was capable of evil, even a superior. While he has preferences toward the Templars, he accepted his role in the Inquisition to do what he considered right, using those viewed low moments as fuel to change for the better. An early game moment where he disrupts a confrontation between a mage and Templar had me impressed. When established in Skyhold, he reveals his addiction. To combat mages, Templars require a constant use of lyrium to enhance their capabilities and utilize dispelling magics. But Samson, a character from Dragon Age 2 that can appear in this game depending on which faction supports you, says Templars can leave the order anytime they want, but the Chantry uses their cravings to ensure loyalty. As he puts it, they're the only ones who got the dust. Prolonged use can lead to serious mental decline. Withdrawal from the mineral is a personal agony for the user. Physical embodiments such as sweating or the shakes, insomnia, nightmares, and irritable mood. Unfortunately, the list goes on. Yet Cullen knows this and chooses to willingly detach from the addiction and walk the uncertain road to recovery. Cassandra has agreed to remove him from service if he becomes a liability. These two examples got me to really buy into Cullen's growth throughout the series. The type of person who took the worst things that happened to him as lessons and used that to grow, taking the options that are a sucker punch in the moment for the belief that things will get better if we try. Wait a minute, this is Blackwall footage. If Cullen was just a cool guy from the get-go, I would have thought he was fine. Seeing this as a progression from where he started, I appreciate the character more. It also plays into the excitement of the setting, the chance that anyone, even a character playing a minor part, can change roles through the series, which is an excellent segue to talking about our spy master, Sister Nightingale. In Origins, Liliana could be one of your party members, dealing with the Fifth Blight, a born-again believer with a personal connection to the Maker. In the Ashes of Andraste scenario, during the first trial, the Guardian asks for the thoughts of the party members about their hidden truths. You're asked a question pertaining to your origin, Alistair if he regrets not saving his mentor, if he really thinks everything would be better if they traded places. Morgan shuts the whole concept down and that's respected. Liliana's is interesting. The spirit mentions there was only one who had a connection to the Maker, and that was Andraste herself, suggesting your companion made up the story for the attention, because whether that was the good or bad kind, it made her special, different. She will outright refuse this claim. When I played this got me to consider Liliana was not as innocent as she presented herself. The spirit had info that no one else should know. Bond's never spoken to the group. I looked up other party members' reactions out of curiosity and was surprised how they fell into truthfully expressing their regrets, uncertainty, or not having to answer. Liliana is the only one to deny the claim. Once an Orlesian bard with a dark past, the Chantry gave her a new life and purpose. While I do think that's sincere, her past and this moment made me consider there's more to her than seen. Her kindness may be true, but the pragmatism is whittled down. In Inquisition, you get a more full picture. Liliana, much like Cassandra, was a hand of the divine, where the right was known as the blade, the left was a more subtle approach. The kind of actions you would admit in a confessional, blackmail, assassinations, threats, anything to deal with problems of the Chantry a mace couldn't accomplish. A middle ground for her religion and Orlesian training. The death of Divine Justinia shakes her, a crisis of faith evident in that first conversation. It's more than just an important figure's murder, it's one of a friend, a mentor, the person who was so vital to your life that they leave a hole that seems impossible to fill. In most cases, it's one that never does. It's more about how to carry on despite that empty pit still being there. Liliana's storyline is how she copes. She's got a unique role that differs from the others, advisors or party members. Depending on how the player interacts with her, she'll either adopt a pragmatic outlook or back to a more hopeful approach. That hardened one is there by default and requires challenging that idea for her to soften. This isn't from a single dialogue choice, it requires a few that are quietly tallied in the background. Much like Alistair stated in Origins, it's more subtle than other choices, quiet, waiting there in the dialogue options to be explored, culminating in Liliana having an opposing agent at knife point. First time I played, I told Liliana not to do it, and she said no. The woman falls to the ground and the duo carries on. At the time, I was really frustrated with this result, and now I'm conflicted. On one hand, having characters with their own agency is great. You may be allies, but they have their own internal logic that motivates them, outlooks and choices that are consistent with their ideals. You may be a player character, but you don't control how everything works out. Characters making choices that make sense to them is something I love in RPGs. They're more than just the tank or the spellcaster. They're characters that I can buy into as people, which in turn makes me believe in the world or story it's going for. On the other hand, this is something the player controls, in a way that's quite obtuse. No other character functions like this, and the game doesn't mention it either. I talked with other people about this game, and they had no idea you could change this moment and what decides the outcome. On that first full playthrough at around the 5-hour mark, I let her deal with a traitor without intervening. I wasn't a spy master and figured she knew what she was doing. And that choice locked in her mindset for the rest of the game, even after picking more straightforwardly kind options. To be fair, Origins also did this with Alistair and his side quest. Speak this dialogue choice and double down to make it stick. I'm harder on Inquisition primarily because it's a longer game. so you have more time with the effects of your choices. Liliana is also a part of another quest line choosing a new divine, and if chosen, her mindset leads to different outcomes. So to change this personality the game doesn't tell you about, you need to say these specific dialogue choices during different parts on a playthrough to get this result in this moment. I like the idea of this. Liliana is an interesting character that either option seems a fitting choice, but with how vague the game is conveying this, especially when this is the only time Inquisition does it, I find it whack. Funny enough, it's the last advisor's questline that I actually think pulls off player choice in a clear and interesting way. Ambassador Josephine of House Montpellier is the Inquisition's diplomatic powerhouse. She knows which hands to shake and which favors can make things happen. Detesting violence from an unfortunate past event, she much rather prefers words to get the job done. During your questline, when revealing the Montpelliers are broke and expressing interest in restoring their former trading glory, but missing documents and assassins have gotten in the way of that. So 2 ideas are suggested. Liliana is willing to offer her talents in dealing with it, blood often getting a job done faster than bureaucracy, or it can be done Josephine's way, instilling titles to a rival house, the Du Paraquets, to annul the contract. Josephine's way takes more time, but no one gets hurt. It's a choice that utilizes the war table operations in a cool way. Either option has the same end goal. How would you like to conduct it? While both options have their merits, I usually go with Josephine's idea because it sounds better in the long run, and I love to see characters using other avenues for power besides murder. It's one of my go-to reasons for trying non-lethal approaches if available. A blade can be an effective tool, but getting the rival house's sponsor by relaying info about her mage lover? Color me intrigued. I want to see how this pans out. All the advisors are good people with good intentions, a core trait for their positions, but Josephine is perhaps the kindest of them. I can really buy into her character, a person who is so focused on keeping busy and helping others they rarely think of themselves. One of her best conversations starts with a formal discussion and evolves into a venting session on the balcony. It was a surprising moment I really liked. I will admit, I do have a hard bias here. She was my go-to romance option my first time through, and it's adorable. That's another thing I found quite impressive with Inquisition. The BioWare style of romance here is great. As I've gotten older, I've had a knee-jerk reaction to video game romances. I felt a bit weird about it because I viewed it as more wish fulfillment. I don't mean to position myself as above the idea as I scoffed from my wax throne of maturity. That line on wish fulfillment was a classic case of projection. I got Fire Emblem Conquest for 2 very big reasons. Playing through the different Dragon Age games, I was impressed with the quality of romances here. There's enough distance between myself and the character that I can buy into them falling for each other, compared to my previous attempts of being a real ladies' man and my characters rocking a blank 1,000-yard stare and no charisma. Funny enough, I actually think the voice protagonist works here for that very reason. I'm watching these two talking and I can see this connection forming in real time. I also like how it's not just about the physical aspect. Even Isabella from Dragon Age 2, one that was often cited as the male fantasy of a smoking hot babe, had a romance that was eventually realizing she cared about Hawk after years of physical connection. In gameplay, it's picking the flirty dialogue and maintaining it like a game of ping pong until it turns into something more and doubling down. It's how charismatically it's presented that the interest comes in. There's flirtations back, conversations about feelings and uncertainties, scenes that sound incredibly silly at first, but then have the same reaction to characters on screen confessing their love for each other, and you think, just kiss already. With Josephine's, I remember it made me feel that wistful kind of delight, where the eyes crinkle and your lips solidify in a tight smile as the corners are tucked in. You place a hand on your heart, moved by seeing two people act in that romanticized view of love that gets you swept up in the moment. You know it's fiction, and for those few seconds you think sincerely, "Aww." It's in these moments where I passively watch that I can find myself believing in the Inquisitor as a character. The romances also feel different from each other. Compare Iron Bull's willingness for a casual approach with Cassandra's desire for the sweep off her feet kind of love, poetry, courting, that kind of stuff. Or Sarah's more playful and public approach. There's a universal constant of two people falling for each other, but they evolve at a different pace with different priorities. It's an extension at how good the character work in this game can be. On the subject of companions, I find myself enjoying the cast. It's a different dynamic than the previous games. The Inquisition is an organization, and your allies feel more like co-workers than your good friends. The home-based Skyhold is like an office, with your companions all in their assigned spots. Cassandra is outside on break, Iron Bull is lounging in the cafeteria, Solus in his office, Cole up in the cafeteria's rafters. It's a formal professionalism that creates some distance with the exceptions of your romance and one or two others. However, that doesn't mean bad. It offers some interesting explorations a tight cast couldn't bring so close together. Take Cassandra, once a seeker of the Chantry, now a frontliner for the Inquisition. Her introduction in Dragon Age 2 led to some caution. After all, she interrogates Varric, friend of all, so there's going to be some sort of tension being on the same side. Get more time with her, and you can notice her brashness is paired with good intentions. Much like her playstyle, Cassandra is about tackling problems head on and go from there. When there's a hole in the sky, her immediate goal is to fix it. But with much of the world's problems, there are complexities that get in the way of what is seen as the obvious problem. Those roadblocks frustrate her, and that's what leads to the brashness and to doubt. That latter part is what I find makes her really endearing. She believes in the Maker, the ideals of service and justice, and tries to do what she considers right. In moments alone, she'll admit her constant uncertainty. If what she's done and will continue to do is correct, if she'll be known as a crazed fool in the history books, not so much for her personal legacy, more on how the world will be in regard to her choices. One of the worst parts of uncertainty is the delayed feedback in the choices you make. You do something, and it's only in hindsight where you ultimately learn how it was. But for those grueling stretches of time in the thick of it, it's quite the foe. If you're old enough to watch this, you're familiar with this feeling to various degrees. Creating this, I'm right there with you. When it's revealed that Varric actually knew where Hawk was the whole time, she's furious, saying stuff that's way over the line. When the adrenaline dies down, that fury is positioned as cold disappointment at herself. The world was in chaos and she was more capable. Everything bad, like the Conclave explosion, could have been prevented. Of course, she can't truly know that. All it would have done is change the position of players, but she doesn't see it that way.
I don't deserve to be here.
What I admire about Cassandra's character is how, while she feels those doubts, she doesn't let that stop her from action. She's much like every other character, just winging all of this in the hope that it pans out. In other words, she believes. Whether the Inquisitor is Andraste's chosen or not, she believes you're capable enough to see this mission through, and despite her doubts, she'll keep going. One line that stuck with me was during a conversation at Skyhold. Cassandra says she believes in tradition, but does not fear change. That seemed very evident in her questline. When looking into her order's disappearance, she and the Inquisitor confront Lord Seeker Lucius. Once a modest man willing to compromise, after learning the secrets of the order, it broke him, believing now the world must be destroyed to build something better in its place. That info being passed to Cassandra at the quest's end. That the Rite of Tranquility, the magical lobotomies that were used to strike fear into mages and lead to the conflict's expansion, was reversible. In fact, that ceremony is what caused Seekers to gain their powers. After being tranquil, a spirit of faith would be summoned. If the mortal's intentions were good, the spirit would remove the tranquility and give their powers. As a refresher, the Templars' reason for monitoring mages was their connection to the Fade, the places where demons resided. It's also the hub for spirits too. This info proves the Templars have been hypocritical in their approach. The Fade is dangerous, and yet here they are, cavorting with these otherworldly entities. One might say it's a spirit based on virtue, so it's okay. Yet justice was based off of virtue, and that led to Kirkwall's escalation. But this is the blasphemous secret Cassandra is given, and now arises the question if the Seekers are worth re-establishing. Remember, they were once the First Inquisition. Are they doomed to repeat this history? It goes back to that initial question I asked earlier in the video. When all is said and done, what will this amount to? Cassandra doesn't know, yet will choose to try anyway. She knows realistically we can never know where the paths will go unless we walk them with earnest hopes.
There is no way to know for certain. That is why we must seek it out. Perhaps we lost our way because we stopped looking.
In the dialogue choice, she asks what should be done, and I was pleasantly surprised the game included an option I wanted to voice, a choice I wish was more prevalent in companion quest lines. It's up to you. I get to make a bunch of choices in RPGs, from who dies to which banner I plant for landmarks. I want to see what she comes up with. Let her cook. Cassandra is a charming character, and I consider her up there with the series greats for her personality and questline. Her dynamic with Varric is also fantastic. Part resentment about the interrogation business, part distinct personality types clashing. This exchange conveys it pretty well.
Harding, huh? Ever been to Kirkwall's Hightown?
I can't say I have. Why?
You'd be Harding and... No, never mind.
Ugh.
And part secret admiration. In a casual bit of party dialogue, Cassandra asks how Varric writes so well. Perhaps an odd question, how would she know his writing style? Cut to a dozen hours later with the secret revealed. She's a fan. Not of Hardin Hightown, the famous one, but Swords and Shields, the romance serial. As described by the creator,
That book is easily the worst I've ever written. The last issue barely sold enough to pay for the ink.
but there's something so captivating about it. She's read it 3 times. It's a fun scene, and it's also a good reminder that much like Swords and Shields, you don't get to choose what people find their favorites of your works, and you don't get to choose the parts others love about you. And on that note, Varric, my friend, my literary lad, my pal, my home slice, my Kirkwallian comrade. Seeing the full picture at this current point makes me feel really bad for him in Inquisition. The guy's charm is still there, the everyman who often grounds the cast with jokes at the expense of the cataclysmic events, the kind of guy from your group chat that DMs you, hey, this stuff going on is crazy, how are you holding up? In other words, a total bro. But that personable attitude hides the messier stuff. Guilt, shame, regret. There's a big main story quest called Here Lies the Abyss. I'll be referring to it a few times with the party members I took. Blackwall, Solus, and Varric, as they offer additional insights to each character. Events lead your party and a few others to the Fade, home turf for demons and spirits. The fiend in charge here is the Nightmare. Demons are often categorized by their desires, rage, hunger, and pride, to name a few. For this encounter, that desire is fear, primal and easy to consider for anyone. As the party travels for a way out, the Nightmare will speak to each of your companions, articulating a deep terror a character would rather keep locked away. Varric's goes like this.
Once again, Hawk is in danger because of you, Varric. You found the Red Lyrium. You brought Hawk here.
When I was playing Dragon Age 2, I noticed how Varric seemed more low-key than the other castmates. Anything negative was briefly mentioned and then moved to the next topic. One of the flaws of being a friend-to-all type of person is the unease of talking about yourself and your problems. You view conversations as what other people can get out of it rather than yourself, so anything to harsh the vibe should be avoided. If they do, it's cool. That sounds like a legitimate problem or annoyance. Of course that would bother someone and they should express that. But you may not give yourself that same courtesy. If other people share, it's a gift. They're expressing their honest feelings to you. If you do, you feel like you're burdening them. Of course, that makes no sense. If a friend told you that, you would totally disagree with that idea. But in your case, it feels different. You're with yourself 24/7 and often the harshest critic. I noticed similarities in Varric. It was there in 2 with his brother Bartrand and the Red Lyrium idol. In that game, he would mention it, but always for how it wronged you. Bartrand could even be killed by Varric depending on choices, and that never gets talked about. Varric is the kind of person that could get along with anyone, but Hawk seems like his legitimate ride-or-die friend. They've known each other for years through constant battles and conversations. I also think Varric feels guilty about Hawk, viewing 2's events as his fault, kicked off by that initial proposition in Hightown after returning that coin pouch that could lead to Hawk's sibling dying in the Deep Roads. Of course it isn't. How could he have known how things would turn out? But that's the thing about guilt. It's easier to be more compassionate with others than your own, rationalizing that if you did this instead of that, it wouldn't have happened. Perhaps that's a strong reason why Varric didn't tell Cassandra about Hawk's whereabouts. He didn't want to sell out his closest friend he felt guilty about. With the Inquisitor, Varric seems more open to express those emotions. That initial knee-jerk to move on is still there, but he'll admit his shame about Kirkwall, Corypheus, and his role in it. When Cassandra says he's just looking out for himself, it's another voicing that feeling he has for himself. When the Inquisition is strengthened with Skyhold and the player officially recognized as the Inquisitor, Varric realizes how serious these events are and reaches out to Hawk. No matter what happens in the future, when Varric asks for help, Hawk answered without hesitation, because that's the kind of friend Varric was to them. Hawk's appearance in Inquisition is awesome, and this leads me to a big incentive to this title if you enjoy this series. Regardless of not liking the combat or gameplay, and regardless of the lack of in-depth role-playing, it's for how the game continues from your choices. This is something that was universal in the series until Veilguard. The idea that having choices you made carry over across the games was the coolest. Not just the big ones, but also small. It was helping the Orzammar citizen Dagna study magic at the Circle of Magi and showing up at Skyhold, or King Alistair requesting assistance at the war table. The Ashes of Andraste mentioned by a preacher in Lowtown, or as monumental as meeting Morrigan's son if the Dark Ritual happened. Originally, this was carried over by a player's save file into different games. For Inquisition, there's this site called Dragon Age Keep, where you could import your choices throughout the series to create a personalized world state. If you made a choice one way, it would mention other choices needed to be adjusted to stay consistent. It was really cool because while it wouldn't change everything, it carried the possibility that anything could be referenced. It could be a line of flavor dialogue, like Cullen admitting a crush on the hero Ferelden if she was a mage, Solus on his perspective of the Battle of Ostagar, Varric on the happenings of the companions from 2, Liliana mentioning my character's ultimate sacrifice was one that stuck with me. Playing the games more, I noticed these choices don't chart the story in various branches, more about adding some flavor. Here Lies the Abyss shows this idea at its peak, with Hawke's Warden contact either being Stroud, Alistair if it wasn't made a king, or Loghain if inducted into the Wardens. They have the same role, and it's more swapping who plays the part than completely changing the quest. While the options are light, the game's willingness to remember and track these choices is really cool. The ways you affect the setting are tangible. I don't know any other RPGs willing to track this kind of stuff. I can only imagine how much work had to go into creating this, writing for over hundreds of choices, having to create different scenes, and getting a bunch of lines that only a few players will actually hear. That's insane. In addition to working on every other part of the game, and especially knowing about the design problems mentioned in Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, the fact they're still in the game is commendable. The idea that my playthrough and yours could be different based on our choices from other titles is exciting. Knowing that the franchise prioritized that got me into playing these games for over 100 hours, doing as many quests as I could to see how they might affect the series in future games. If this is your first title, that fact may not sound the most exciting, but if you followed this series, it showed the developers would consistently reward your involvement and commitment to the series. Maybe even that idea got you to play Origins just to see how it would change. Sometimes this can lead to problems for the sake of the narrative. You can kill Oghren in Origins and he'll still show up in Awakening. I had one where Justice died at that expansion's finale, yet was able to become Vengeance in 2. Liliana is such a plot-crucial character in this game, so if you killed her at the Temple of Sacred Ashes in that first game, she's back and has some dialogue about that, similar to stabbing Morrigan in Witch Hunt, and I'm going to speculate the root cause for this. I think it's because Origins set the bar so high. That game offered plenty of choices, large and small, the Dark Ritual, who's king, the fate of party members, who wins the right of succession to Orzammar, etc. Some choices even changing the very world they're a part of, like the boons at the end of the game, gifts for your service to the kingdom if you survive. Perhaps your warden is Chancellor or owns the estate of Loghain. If you're a city elf, you or your cousin can become a band representing the elves in Denerim's elite. What made these choices so vast was because Bioware wasn't sure of getting a sequel. As mentioned in this article, that was a reason the epilogues were written so conclusively, to wrap everything up just in case. Fortunately, the games continued, but that led to a whole new problem. To account for a lot of choices, the effects couldn't be large because that would branch the story into a whole bunch of different directions, and that could completely eat the budget. Plus, it would suck if one version of the game was so much better than the other versions. So, some choices were cut. I was bummed learning the City Elf boon didn't work out in 2. You may not have picked these choices, and I didn't for a good chunk of those described, but I highlight this to show that while the Keep is a cool system that accounts for previous decisions, it's not a perfect system. Oftentimes, the scope can lead to slight differences and not much else. If you dig too deep, you might find even more. Overall, while not a groundbreaking system, I appreciate they found a way to work it into Inquisition. But one of the parts I really do like about the Keep is how Hawke is incorporated. I find them to be one of the cooler parts of the system, because they're an established character with an established voice. The transition from player character to short-term companion isn't jarring. Their class can be changed, including their appearance. Also, I just want to highlight something if you've seen my Dragon Age 2 video. If I wanted the cool trademark Hawke switch, I needed to take it with the amber-colored eyes and the straight-edged, 90-degree angle beard on the sides. How do you even maintain that? That's incredible. Viewer, this is a good day. I also love how they carried over the idea of Hawke's personality stacking in 2. Depending on which one you pick, they'll deliver their lines with that attitude. It's a fun way of doing a legacy character, passing the torch to the next protagonist. What fun! Yet fun is not necessarily how the questline ends for poor Varric. At the end of Here Lies the Abyss, you make a choice. The nightmare blocks the path. Someone needs to stay behind. Who do you pick? Do you go with Hawke, the player character who crawled their way up from refugee to the champion of Kirkwall over a decade, sticking close to their friends even when their actions pulled the city apart, their family becoming smaller and smaller until they were all that's left? A role that acts as both a gift and a curse, yet still carries on. Or Stroud, the Warden. Ooh, tough call. In my playthrough, it was an easy choice, but I could see it being so much worse if it was Alistair or even Loghain. Yet, to be contrarian, I chose Hawk, primarily because I wanted to see how Varric would react. I want to stress, what I'm about to say next is me being very salty. This isn't a reflection of the entire game's quality, but I am so butthurt about this moment, because this scene that could be a complete gut punch, the mourning of a player character to their best friend, should be devastating. And I think it's the worst scene in the game. It stems from two main things: the blocking and the vocal delivery. Inquisition's cutscenes can be really cool. Great shot composition and framing, interesting lighting, cool cinematography such as entering the Fade. Even a conversation scene can have awesome direction to give it some flavor. I enjoyed this scene where Cullen and the Inquisitor play chess, and how asking additional questions leads to moves on the board. It's like a fun back and forth where the characters are learning more about each other from the match and outside of it. Sometimes that direction isn't always as strong, from jarring technical moments like the music abruptly stopping, visual glitches, or just awkward pacing. This is such an example. So for context, I took Varric into the Fade for this moment. He should have seen Hawk sacrificed as we escaped. This is his reaction.
Where's Hawk? Where's Hawk?
This is the first bit. It's the same line, not one of two different deliveries, but repeated. There could have been an error in the recording booth, but the effect is really noticeable here. Okay, now my character has some options to convey this. I can blame the wardens with an aggressive response, a matter-of-fact response, or a sad option which I picked. This was a difficult choice, and a more tactful response would be good.
Hawk sacrificed his life to save us and strike a decisive blow against Corypheus.
You dick. He just lost his best friend. Why are you delivering this like you're telling people to synergize business developments? Hawk sacrificed to land a decisive blow. Decisive blow these nuts, dude. Do we need a perk for special dialogue to be empathetic? Fuck you, dude. And then the camera cuts and Varric speed walks heartbroken, and we just sit there for an awkward amount of time before I resume my TED Talk. This should be an impactful moment. Varric just learned the only other person in his life is gone, and I think how that was shown was a dang shame. What's odd is that the next Varric scene is great. The delivery is on point and the story changes depending on which personality Hawk has. Varric also has a questline involving the one who shares his crossbow's name and exploring an old Tig, culminating in a fun scene of wicked grace if your approval is high enough. But this stuff relating to Hawk is what I found the most compelling, and especially knowing how Varric functions in Veilguard, it's a tragic prelude. The next two party members are ones that I like but don't have much to say on. That's Lady Vivian and Sarah. Let's buck tradition here and start with the latter. Sarah is a character I like in concept more than execution, but she's interesting, part of the Red Jenny organization. Think of the people in the upper echelons raised in a way where their roles or status wasn't seen as a gift to be grateful for or wielded responsibly, but as a vehicle for vanity and pride, cruelty for those beneath the heel of their finely waxed boot. Now imagine a collection of people: the elven kitchen servants, the candlemaker operating late in the night to support her family, the dock workers with calloused hands, and many other unsung heroes who keep everything running well, had an organization dedicated for revenge against the upper class. Ranging from light antics, maybe misplace a few jewels here, put a jar filled with bees there, maybe take some trousers while we're at it, to more serious ones like assassinations. Those are the Friends of Red Jenny, a web of people of various backgrounds and professions who participate in Rube Goldberg machines of social chaos for righting wrongs and profit. As a higher up in the group, Sarah offers a great perspective an Inquisitor could pay heed to, that for all the grand moves in the world, it's important to remember that ultimately it's about the people, not systems or organizations. With the tears across the world, Sarah sees all the higher ups squabbling and thinks they're being stupid. The problem is right here. There are giant holes in the sky. Get off the embroidered cushion and fetch the tailor. She can be quite abrasive sometimes, which can lead to some funny moments with other characters, or talking to your Inquisitor. Heated exchanges culminates in name-calling on par with the classics, like your mom or pfft. And there is something fun in a character reacting to all the world's events in a believable way. Her comments on seeing a dragon is pretty good. Occasionally, I do find myself frustrated with her in character, especially in her questline, where if you ask too many questions to a minor antagonist, she'll kill the guy right in front of you and can lead to an argument back at Skyhold. I love how the game has her act on her actions here, with a noble who got someone in her group killed. I totally get her wanting to finish the job. What I get annoyed with is that she doesn't own up to her mistake about the encounter. It's everyone else's fault, not hers. But it's also a moment I like because the game lets you articulate that. While the dialogue system can be hit or miss, I appreciate when talking with companions, your responses can vary and aren't different flavors of yes. Like in this recording, I was nodding my head when I saw you could argue with Sarah about this moment, outright admonish her, and for a few seconds, she actually sees where she went wrong, and you can even kick her out of the Inquisition if you wanted. Yet, doing that will rob you of one of her best scenes, a peace offering, if you will, where the two of you do some light pranks with your Skyhold advisors. She mentions shifting furniture around Cullen's office will annoy the general, and that'll humanize him to those serving, and she'll show restraint too, refusing to mess with Liliana's private things for a bit of fun. It shows an endearing side to Sarah, contrasting her abrasive attitude with nobility. She knows the importance of levity and a good laugh for others. Especially with the world on the Inquisition's shoulders, morale is a vital resource and Sarah is a strong advocate for it. If you sit on the throne of judgment to condemn a criminal and hear a whoopee cushion, roll with the punches and have yourself a good laugh. Those in the audience will thank you. It was on this replay that I found Vivienne's role to be quite interesting. The Circle of Magi is often seen as the way for mages. Anything else gets broadly labeled as an apostate. A lot of your spellcasting companions in these games fall under that category. The only exception I can think of is Wynne. That's what I find makes her interesting, because she's one of the few to support the status quo of mages, and especially her being a part of that group is intriguing. It was through this system where she thrived. As she mentions in conversations, every circle is different. Her upbringing in Ostwick cultivated her talents of both spellcasting and her talent in the game to become Empress Celine's court enchanter and given the name Madame de Fay, the Lady of Iron, uttered in both reverence and fear. This system gave her those opportunities and she's quick to defend it. When the rebellion kicked off, she remained as one of the loyalists, resentful of their actions, the attitude along the lines of, "You're making all of us look bad." She'll agree the Templars can be overzealous, but as soon as murder is used to get the point across, they've lost the plot. I can see that stemming from two views. The first being the main outlook of the Chant of Light. Magic is meant to serve men, not to rule over them. These abilities should be cultivated, but uncontrolled power is dangerous. A bolt of fire can produce light, but a fireball chars bones. One of the key points of circles, it's a funny line, is a controlled environment for spellcasters to practice and learn. In that sense, Vivienne is quite lawful in that regard. One of the best parts of education is having others to coach and highlight which areas need improvement. The circles can be a great opportunity for that, yet that doesn't mean they all do. It may be like that in Ostwick, but Kirkwall was not so lucky and look how that turned out. The second is a more practical outlook. In a conversation about the rebellion, she'll say something along the lines of, "For every spellcaster, there are 100 ordinary people, and picking a fight with a popular majority is a bad call." Combine these two views and Madame's talent for power playing, scathing in a polite way that feigns a smile and deploys a backhanded compliment seconds apart. Her dialogue with companions is quite entertaining in that sense. She never loses her cool, especially with her using frost magic. After the attack of Haven, she'll have a conversation with the Inquisitor, point out how they miscalculated, and notice how it's not public. It's just them. She mentions this can't happen again. What's cool about having someone so good at the game is their ability to convey and handle power. Much like untrained mages, it could end up killing you or causing a whole bunch of problems. But wielded correctly, it can accomplish more than a weapon ever could. Vivienne is a character that is interesting and unpredictable. She cares for the common good of fixing the sky and punishing the wicked. While the Lady of Iron does have a heart that you can see firsthand in her questline, perhaps it's once the world is fixed that her skills in the game can really begin. Speaking of the game, with the Inquisition becoming a strong political power, it puts you in situations previous adventures couldn't provide. The game, otherwise known as the Grand Game, is both an Orlesian pastime and a dangerous sport, a dance of intrigue, romance, pride, cunning, and misconduct by the higher-ups. It is so prevalent that even the Chantry of the Kingdom plays. Imagine if the Pope was also a master at social espionage. Throughout the series, there's been mentions of it. Liliana will often be the strongest link. Midway through the story, the player will get the mission, Wicked Eyes and Wicked Hearts. I love this main story mission so much. It's not perfect. In fact, it can be infuriating and quite stressful depending on the ending you're going for. But it is one of the coolest parts of this game, and I'd say of the series. In fact, it's so good, it's getting its own section. Viewer, break out a wine glass or that bottle of red or a preferred equivalent. Don your slickest attire and polish off those moves. We're invited to the Winter Palace. Ah, you made it, and looking incredible if I may be so bold to say. Here's the setup. This ball at Hemsharel is the backdrop for negotiations with some of the key players looking to take the Orlesian throne. There's the current Empress, Celine, diplomat and reformer, looking to ensure peace for the kingdoms, even if the inhabitants see that as a weakness. Unfortunately, some intel reveals she's the target of an assassination attempt. But who connects such a thing? Could it be her cousin, Grand Duke Gaspard, the militaristic chevalier next in line for the throne? Perhaps Ambassador Briala, the figurehead of the city's elves. Rumors also suggest a former lover of the Empress, one that did not end on the best of terms. Attempts to warn the Empress have been snuffed out, yet thanks to Gaspard, we have been given an invitation to attend the ball. So the plan is simple. Attend the party, identify the pieces on the board, and stop the assassination attempt. Or don't. You see, one of my favorite aspects of the mission is how, for all the shakeups it does on the gameplay side, it's more than most other missions embraces player choice with over 5 different options for how it goes down, which I'll expand on as the section goes along. The most powerful thing is not your equipment, but your conduct. On the outset, the plan is to stop the murder, but it's not quite that simple. You can't just say what you mean, that's too unrefined by Orlesian standards. To control the fate of the peace talks, you need to learn how to play the game. Through this mission, you will have a bar indicating court approval. This is the representation of the public's consensus. Embody a social stigma or say something considered dull, foolish, or blunt? That's a negative hit right there. But showing tact, keeping your cards close to your chest, perhaps displaying social graces? That's worth a few approving nods. What this does is encourages you to roleplay. If your approval drops to 0, the Inquisitor gets kicked out of the ball with no party favors, the social equivalent of a game over. It gives a personal connection with the player and the culture of Orlais. We've heard it, and now we walk around and experience it. And the fun, or not so fun part, depending on your thoughts on it, if you're a human warrior or rogue, you'll start with 45 approval points right out of the gate. If you're a human spellcaster, elf, or dwarf, regardless of class, lose 10 points because of social attitudes. Lose 15 if you're a Quinari, regardless of class. Humans are the most dominant race in Thedas, so they're treated a lot better than the others. While other races start with less approval, I think those Inquisitors can have a very compelling arc in the Winter Palace, because if a human is good at the game, they played their hand skillfully, and that's impressive. But an elf, dwarf, or Qunari who walked into the palace handicapped adapts so skillfully they controlled the talk's outcome with the approval of the court? That's brilliant. But how does one play the game well? This is where the mechanics get shaken up like that fancy cocktail they serve at the bar. Most of it is about conversations and exploring the palace, weaving a careful balance of being a strong social presence while ducking out to uncover evidence and rather scandalous information. Right at the start, I want to show you one quick detail. In the gardens, you can hear the murmurings of the partygoers, the chirping of birds, maybe even of an ornate fountain if you're close enough. Check it out when you walk into a locked storage room. It's quiet. The sounds outside are muffled. Moments to give pause and think. A breather from the game of appearances outside by all the Orlesian nobles, as you find a secret tucked away in a corner a writer never expected a guest to read. Or climb up from the lower gardens following bloodstains to a door locked by a magic statue with a document and bodies inside. Go further to the Grand Library and panic as the bell rings, calling guests back to the ballroom. Do you have enough time to open the secret stairway? Being fashionably late is respectful. Very late. Now that's just crass. The party occurs in sections, triggering certain events to have the night progress. In hallways of public gatherings, you can meet up with your companions and advisors, willing to share their perspective and advice. What's interesting is how your companions will admit their leanings if asked. Cassandra's response surprised me. Her attitude of the game being a waste of time made a lot of sense. The suggestion that if it was her call, she'd let Celine die and Gaspard rule got me to raise an eyebrow. Why does she merit our protection, she'll ask. The Inquisition is dedicated to saving the world, but having its members make their case for how to conduct that in Orlais was cool. It reminded me you can still have a team of good characters and have different opinions of what is considered correct. Because what you'll come to learn traversing the halls, reading documents, and talking to folks is that no one's hands are clean. Celine, Gaspard, and Briala all have skeletons in their closets hidden away by magical holostatues. This is an especially cool level to play after reading the tie-in novel for the game, The Masked Empire. It's been a while since I read it, but I really enjoyed the book. We only get a small glimpse of these characters with Inquisition, but the novel adds some background and extra complexity. I remember really liking Gaspard. The dude outright hated the game and wanted to control Orlais with might and fear, willing to wage war on the other kingdoms. Self-serving, yet caring for his men, and holding a personal code of honor he wouldn't forsake, even for an advantage. But regardless of reading the novel, as long as you keep a keen eye and your ears open in this den of vipers, you'll uncover some interesting information. Like Gaspard planting Ferelden mercenaries to create a coup during the peace talks, Briala murdering ambassadors and forging of documents, not to mention the rumors of her love affair being confirmed with an elven locket hidden away in the Empress's vault. The very same woman who purged the elven alienages of Hem-Sharal seems to be quite sentimental. And I couldn't forget the Empress, who knew about the mercenaries and let it happen, aiming for her cousin's arrest when caught. Uncovering this information requires a lot of snooping and others to testify. To get that particular information and ending while in the moment seemed calculating and suave for the Inquisitor was a 2-hour play session piloted by a nervous wreck. With the night passing at certain checkpoints, I was spamming the search button and I'm running through the halls like a guest who drank too much punch and had a lot to prove on the dance floor. My eyes would dart between the beautiful palace and the utilitarian guide on my phone. That statue really brings the room together. So would that juicy bit of gossip. Where is it? I'm reloading saves and bellowing out curse words that would make the handmaidens blush as I fumble up a barrel in the servants' quarters, balancing on beams to grab that Hala statue comparable to Iron Knight Tarkus on the catwalks of Anor Londo. The timer's a reminder to hurry along. Don't stop to smell the roses, go, go, go. I find myself completely bypassing all the beauty the art team did in creating this kingdom's grand visual design and booking it to the next story sequence. I was missing the gardens for the bloodstains. When I think of this level, I'm reminded of the concept, the class, the verbal duels that border on aggressive questioning with a smile. When I play it, it's like a glass of watered-down port. While I get a lot of the flavor, I'm reminded of the parts that lessen that initial memory. The rigid actions of cause and effect needed to guarantee particular endings. The timer that progresses the evening suddenly when I would have loved to really soak in and savor the atmosphere at my own pace. But with that said, I still love this mission. And I'm grateful the team decided to tackle something like this in the main story, and not to mention incredibly impressed with the options for the endings. Empress Celine can be saved and continue her rule, Gaspard can take over, the former prince can rule in name only with Briala pulling the strings, Briala and Celine can patch things up and rule together, or all come to a temporary truce for Orlais. I find it one of the strongest role-playing related parts of Inquisition. If you have a romance partner, the two of you can have a dance just before the party wraps up. Speaking of which, Dorian Parvis. This guy, what a stud. When I started talking about the companions, I mentioned how the bonds are more formal. Dorian is an easy exception. He's one of the few that legitimately feels like a friend to the Inquisitor. Early on, you choose to get assistance from the Templars or Mages. Whoever you pick will give a different main story quest and a different sub-antagonist. This also shifts which companion you'll meet first. If the Templars, that'll be Cole. If Mages, you'll be honored with Dorian. I will say for this playthrough, it was hard to skip the Inquisitor and Parvis's time-altering adventure, partly because it's a cool concept, and the other because it's a great bonding experience. Dorian is so likable. He's confident in a way that's charming, possessing a wit as sharp as a tack, and heartfelt in a way that feels believable. Not like dialogue for an RPG character, but what an actual person sounds like. And here's where some complexity comes in. He's also from Tevinter. Upper class. If there's a problem in the world, everyone points the finger at the Tevinter Imperium as the culprit. In a setting where magic is often viewed as an uncontrollable and terrifying force, a nation run by mages is seen with heavy suspicion. Its bloodstained history also doesn't help its cause. A big point is their involvement in causing the First Blight, not to be intentionally evil, but a side effect of ambition. As the Chantry tells it, a group of magisters traveled to the Golden City, once the home of the Maker. That act led them permanently changed, creating the first Darkspawn. The main antagonist of the base game is Corypheus, one of those magisters. While adding a huge black mark on the nation, his existence also confirms an uncomfortable truth for the world. That the story from the Chantry has a kernel of truth. While I don't find Corypheus to be very compelling, I do find his concept intriguing. A spellcaster who surpassed the bounds of what's possible, and yet craves more. During the attack of Haven and your first encounter, as he dangles you with a monstrous limb, he states his plan.
I have gathered the will to return under no name but my own, to champion withered Tevinter and correct this blighted world.
And the line I find the most fascinating.
Beg that I succeed, for I have seen the throne of the gods, and it was empty.
Corypheus is a product of Tevinter, unchecked ambition, wielding powers that surpass those of mortal men. This talk of the nation has led to a cult serving the Magister and inflicting chaos upon the world called the Venatori. For this playthrough, my sub-antagonist was Calpurnia, a slave serving the Elder One to reshape the Imperium, one that would not oppress those beneath as it does now. Because another uncomfortable truth of Tevinter is that slavery is legal. This isn't something new to this setting, it's always been there. Origins had a plotline revolving around it in the Denerim alienage, and Kirkwall was once the capital of the slave trade. Even worse, the nation also has a more open mind about blood magic. While it can be argued that it's not inherently bad, often seen as a tool like any other, as long as the caster is using their own or a willing participant's life force, it's all good. When you consider the slavery aspect, it gives the impression that thought process can be legally exploited. The Magisters who entered the city used plenty of blood to get there, and I doubt it was purely from the willing. What Dorian provides is another perspective of the nation, its history, how it's governed, and even his views that can often challenge yours, not just as a character, but as a player, such as his views on slavery. When you ask about it, he'll tell you he never gave the subject much thought until he came south to Ferelden, and while he doesn't own any, his family does. That's just how things are done in Tevinter. Then make an argument for how it's a net positive for one to willingly pledge oneself than how alienages work in the other kingdoms. Poor people trapped with no way out. This is an uncomfortable topic, especially with a character that's so likable, but this is an example of the complexity I find fascinating about the Dragon Age series. It's a setting that embodies moral grayness, much like in real life, and contrast with hyperbole on the internet, people's attitudes and outlooks are complex and nuanced. It's not 100% one view or another, we all have varying experiences and outlooks that color how we see and engage with the world. One aspect of fiction I find totally wicked is when it houses characters whose beliefs can fit within a setting and may clash with our own, because that contrast is fascinating. We may see something and strongly disagree, yet see where a character is coming from, listen to their logic. It can be really rewarding, adding to more immersion into the world. This can be especially interesting if it's a character you like having some uncomfortable aspects. Dragon Age has been great in that department through the games. Sten is one of my immediate go-tos. His belief in the Qun follows an understandable consistency. Questions he asks aren't made to be rude, they're genuine attempts to understand an alien culture. But no matter how much I like that character, he still did something monstrous before the game began. I could really sympathize with Anders in Dragon Age 2, agree how mages were treated was awful, yet disagree with how he dealt with that situation. And even in the small scale, that character conflict is engaging. The companion dialogue is great for that reason. Take two people with different outlooks and listen to where they agree and bicker. Dorian is originally met with suspicion, the Tevinter turncoat just waiting to hurt the Inquisition when his guard is down. But that assumption overlooks the reason that makes Dorian complex. He's genuinely trying to do the right thing, joining the Order because he sees the world on fire and wants to grab a bucket of water rather than gasoline like other countrymen. He knows Tevinter isn't perfect and has plenty of problems, but it's home, and he takes comfort that it can be a nation that he can be proud of. His personal quest is, well, personal. It takes place in a tavern, with you, Dorian, and a planned correspondent that turns out to be his father. It's an emotional scene I could really buy into. Besides being suspected by the Inquisition's members, he's also the odd one out of his family. Proud bordering on arrogant, refusing to make compromises in his life to fit appearances. I find that admirable. What good is an image if all it does is shackle you to something that can never be? That's not an ideal, that's a mental prison. But that's the key thing though. Appearances. It's what keeps Tevinter the way it is. The status quo is to be upheld. It's like the Qun in that general sense. Perform your role and that's who you are. In Tevinter, those of noble birth should be continuing the bloodline and cultivate the magical gene pool for the nation. The Parvis family wanted Dorian to fulfill his duty with his betrothed, but Dorian refused. Because Dorian was into men and didn't want to keep up appearances. What ultimately caused the falling out was blood magic. Taught to never be used by his father, now the very tool the eldest Parvis planned to fix him. Dorian found out and hasn't seen his father since. It wasn't because he was attracted to men, but because Dorian was not acting as he should. It was that priority for the appearance of normalcy, instead of accepting him for who he really was, that broke Dorian's heart. This emphasis on appearances also affected another character at Skyhold, the second in command of Iron Bull's Chargers, Krem, who also had parents demanding a marriage that contradicted his identity. It's a brief scene but powerful. Dorian refuses to let his father speak as he moves around the room. The wound reopens and lets all the pain come out, the kind only the people we care about can inflict. Conveyed with an insanely good performance, and I am not the only person who felt this way. David Gator, former lead writer for the franchise, publicly stated after writing this scene in one go, he sobbed afterwards. The subject matter was quite near to him, being an openly gay man himself. While I'm not the person who decides what is good representation and what's not, especially for a character with a different sexuality than mine, I like this scene. I can also get into the Inquisitor being there for it. Dorian is a true friend, fighting life or death battles constantly. When the issue is brought up, the Inquisitor can suggest they check it out. Of course I'd be there. That's my boy, regardless of being friends or romancing him like I did for this playthrough. And if you feel similar, there's a scene near the base game's end where he decides to go back to Devinter. Seeing you handling the role of Inquisitor inspires him to put his ideas into action, helping Devinter become a better place.
This is your fault, remember? You inspired me with your marvelous antics. You're shaping the world, for good or ill. How could I aspire to do any less?
In Trespasser, he'll give you ascending crystals so you can talk no matter the distance, because that's how much you mean to him. Dorian is one of my favorite companions in the series. If he was real, I'd consider getting matching tattoos if asked. The charm and complexity in Devinter attitudes creates a character I find really interesting. Which, unfortunately, is what has me think of Iron Bull as alright than as one of my all-time favorites. The guy's pretty cool, with Fred from the live-action Scooby-Doo movies doing a stellar job of bringing him to life. The Iron Bull commands the Chargers Mercenary Band and an active member of the Qun, specifically the Ben Hassarath, the Heart of the Many, kind of like an order of spies. In my previous videos, I've talked about what I find so fascinating about the Qunari and the Qun. It's a culture that's both simple and alien, brutal but not sadistic. A lot of that came from how it was argued by characters like Sten, the Aeroshok, or other Qunari from 2, spoken with true conviction and championing that cause. The Iron Bull, in comparison, isn't like that. While he takes his duties to the Ben Hassarath seriously, he's also more casual in dealing with other cultures. While that makes him more likable as a personality, I find it waters down what makes the Qun so fascinating. Its rigid laws and uncompromising views in a world full of complexities. That doesn't mean it's correct, but it's the conviction of that viewing that's interesting. But Iron Bull's character arc is his conflict between his loyalty to the Qun or the Chargers, a story that is weighing one side to win out rather than exploring the balance of the two, culminating in telling Iron Bull to sacrifice his company for the Ben Hassarath mission or pulling them out and becoming Talfashoth. This is perhaps my least favorite questline in the game, because I don't find it to be an interesting or complex choice. You've known the Charger since early in the game, and at this point had a beer and gotten to know him. The Iron Bull cares deeply for his company, especially his Lieutenant Krem. The Ben Hassarath representative Gat may know our Qunari warrior before the game, but the only chance to argue his case is this final mission. And while the alliance with the Qun sounds cool, it's one that's incredibly vague. From what I could recall, it offers more war table operations using their spy network, and leads to a surprise consequence in Trespasser. I'm just not convinced it's a tough choice. While the Iron Bull may discuss the Qun and the culture, it's expressed like mentioning a neat fact learned off a bar coaster than in principle, more of a, huh, no kidding, than a, whoa. If there was more of an emphasis on the Qun aspect of Iron Bull's scenes, in addition to personality, I could see this becoming more effective. When he casually mentions Cullen's Templar training is really helping out the Inquisition, subtly shows his observational training and talent as a Ben Hassarath agent. My favorite moment was drinking with the Iron Bull at Skyhold. When you kill certain enemy types, you'll get approval. Dragons are what gets the Qunari fired up. The scene occurs after slaying your first. As you pour back drinks that kick like a mule, he'll express his respect for the creatures and hold them sacred. Yet will say,
Dragons are the embodiment of raw power, but it's all uncontrolled, savage, so they need to be destroyed. Taming the wild. Order out of chaos. Have another drink.
I nearly died from it. This is what I mean. There's an initial boisterousness about dragons, then articulates a core aspect of the Qun, taming chaos to bring order and stability. I hadn't considered that interpretation, and appreciated the scene to suggest another viewing, besides killing a scaled foe for street cred and loot buried in its stomach. I wish there would have been more here. As a representative of the Qun, I'm not as invested. As a personality? Yeah, I'd have a beer with him. But let's sandwich this with a character storyline I love and think about a lot. Blackwall. What makes someone a good person? A simple yet complex question that varies depending on the individual. My answer would be intention. To consciously choose to act in a way that is good for others. While I can recognize the flawed logic in it, meaning well doesn't always guarantee good results, but that's my answer, locked in. Because being a good person is something that must be constantly exercised. It's not doing a kind act and the label's there forever. It's got to be maintained, time and time again. Everyone will stumble, act in ways that hurt others, intentionally or not. I have constantly. But it's the intention to try again. That's where the virtue comes in. Even if we won't recognize that in ourselves. I say this because I think Blackwall and the person underneath is a good person. Early in the Inquisition's founding, Liliana poses a lead. While most of the Grey Wardens have disappeared, one remains in the hinterlands. The player meets Warden Constable Blackwall as he commands farmers to defend their homes. He has no idea where the other wardens are, but will pledge his service to the cause. Especially in the early moments, it was tough to gather influence for the organization, so when Blackwall suggests, why don't we use those Grey Warden treaties to conscript and rally people to our cause, I thought, Blackwall, you genius, what an excellent idea. So I broke out the scrolls. I get to know the guy better and seems like a stand-up fella. Maybe a little too bristle and serious for my liking, but great in a fight. And then, here lies the abyss. We've already discussed the trip and the fate and the big ticket choice, but the first part of the quest is what I want to discuss now. When I was growing up, I thought the Grey Wardens were so cool, and I still do. The Orlesian color scheme of blue and white looks awesome, and this order of people coming together to save the world, regardless of their personal sacrifices, was noble. This recent playthrough reminded me of another thing. They're fallible. There's always been a detachedness from the Wardens. It's part of the role, duty above all. National pride and personal attachment comes second to ending the Blight. In 2, after making a guest appearance, they dip. Even during the Quinari attack in the second act, it's not their problem. In Inquisition, you're given another perspective, how that nobility can be abused in the name of the greater good. Once a person becomes a Grey Warden, a clock begins to count down before the Darkspawn blood finally corrupts them, known as the Calling. Whispers from the corrupted source can be heard before the end. The hero of Ferelden, if alive, is on a quest to find a cure. But the big thing is the time it occurs varies. 30 years is known to be a generous assumption, but it's happened earlier. When this occurs, a Warden will make their way to the Deep Roads and fight the Darkspawn until they meet a grim fate. This is the flaw Corypheus exploits. By mimicking those whispers, all the Wardens assume their time is nearing an end. If they die, there will be no protection against the Blight and no one can slay the Archdemon. So they make a gamble. They cavort with demons, using blood magic to ensure all blights end forever. Brothers and sisters give their lives, becoming villains to the world in a desperate attempt to save it. In war, victory, in death, sacrifice. In this playthrough, that tragedy sunk in. By exploiting that noble aim beneath the blood and gore, Corypheus perverts the Wardens and their legacy is spoiled forever. Across Thedas, bards will play O Grey Warden, a song expressing the hubris of the Order with lines like, "The oath you have taken is all but broken," and "Can you be forgiven when the cold grave has come?" The Wardens are completely devastated when discovering they served a Darkspawn, not at how the world views them, that was never the point, but how the sacrifices their members made were pointless, contradicting their existence. This isn't something that can be easily corrected. Warden Commander Chlorel sacrifices herself as a final act to save the Inquisition when the treachery is known. And after these events, a warden named Sir Ruth willingly submits for the Inquisitor's judgment, believing she deserves punishment for her actions, one that can never be undone. I think this is a great storyline as a progression to the Wardens, taking the order that once saved the world and exploring a different angle. What happens when the fighting force against the apocalypse is wrong, not by becoming evil for selfish reasons, but sticking to the very mission for their founding to begin with? That's a cool way to use a legacy faction, one the player may have an attachment to like myself, and maybe you do too. But this may get you to ask a question. Hey Blackwall, How come you're the only warden who didn't hear this fake calling? The question is met with a shrug. Take him into the Fade as one of your party members, and the nightmare will say,
There's nothing like a Grey Warden, and you are nothing like a Grey Warden.
The nightmare does this for everybody. Perhaps this is just a misdirection to plant uncertainty in the warrior. But as you'll discover, they were onto something. Later on at a tavern on a sober night, Blackwall will tell you a story. When he was a boy, a group of kids took a starved dog and hung it by the neck. He saw this and did nothing. And that guilt has eaten away at him for years. No matter the words of encouragement the Inquisitor says, it still does, and cements the idea he can never be better. And he gets upset with his drinking buddy, because they make the role look so easy while everyone else struggles to play their minuscule parts. Of course he's not mad at you, but himself. He sees his failures staring back in contrast with your good deeds.
There's always some dog out there.
Injustice will always occur if we turn our heads. So next time you visit his spot in Skyhold or notice his tarot cards sporting different art, he's gone. A crumpled letter states an execution at Val Royeaux, a soldier who contributed to a massacre. Should you attend on a rainy day in the Orlesian city, as the executioner reads his crimes, Blackwall appears and confirms his innocence. The boy was just following orders. His orders. Not Blackwall, the man has been dead for years, but the captain, Tom Rainier. In a prison cell, he confesses the truth. How he took a mission to kill a noble and his family, hiding the reason from his men, not because they threatened the country like he told them, rather so a Chevalier could get closer to Gaspard. When he heard the children were present, he could have called off the order, but didn't for fear what his men would think. His life had followed a similar trajectory, talented, charismatic, but someone who put himself first. So when he acted out of character, saving another from a rowdy bunch, a traveling warden named Blackwall took an interest in him. But at the Storm's Coast, while gathering Darkspawn blood for their joining, Blackwall took a fatal blow in Tom's place. Rainier couldn't look at himself in the mirror with all he'd done, but he saw how noble the wardens were. He wouldn't let the world be deprived of a good one. So Tom disappeared, and Blackwall lived once again. When this is revealed, Tom accepts his fate. His life is over, and now justice must be dealt. As a player, you may have conflicting feelings about this. The world certainly does. Much like the Wardens of Orlais, the Inquisition is also stained. Remember how the treaties were used to gain support? Now the organization's legitimacy is called into question. Influence was given by a criminal, a foundation now shoddy with distrust. But as Tom rots in a cell, the Inquisition is an organization that could pull some strings. In perhaps my favorite war table operation, Tom Rainier's Fate, you have a few options to retrieve the man into your custody. The prison can be raided, a criminal who is identical in appearance can take his place as Tom Rainier dies, Josephine could call a few favors after the Winter Palace situation, or in an alternate operation I just found out about, if you have the Underworld Knowledge perk, you can use some shady connections retrieving the warrior hiding any ties to the Inquisition. This is cool because it goes back to my earlier point. While you're playing a good guy compared to Darkspawn and Demons in the Sky, your hands won't be clean. Doing this, any of these options conveys some abuse of the Inquisition's power. You're taking the law into your own hands getting involved. As Tom learns of Josephine's connections getting him out, he'll call the group corrupt, undoing all of Josephine's hard work, a point additionally fueled by a mutual love they share between each other but can never be. In every playthrough I've done, I've pardoned him, letting him serve the Inquisition of his own volition, because it goes back to the initial point. Tom Rainier is a good person. That doesn't excuse what he's done, chances are he'll remember long after others forget, but that does mean he actively chooses to be better than his past actions. As soon as he wielded Blackwall's name, the former's memory was maintained for years. When people needed help, he jumped in without question. His initial act when the Inquisitor meets him proves that. He could have carried on, ignored the farmer's troubles for the greater good, much like wardens do, but didn't. And when another was subjected to the noose, he didn't look away. He walked to the gallows and accepted his fate, because that's the person Tom is, much to his disagreement. I've come to realize we are the things we do. Regardless of what our personal scoreboards look like, we always have the potential to flip the script on our course and conduct ourselves in a way we can be proud of. Perhaps that's too naive for some, but I'll stand by that, because I believe our pasts don't define our futures. While they're unchanging, we're not. If I deny that possibility, I reject Arthur Morgan, or Thorfinn, or Guts, characters that have done questionable things yet still choose to be better. Who can truly say what qualifies as proper redemption? All I can say is in this moment with Tom, I will gladly give him the chance to try. And his epilogue in Trespasser got me to tear up. If he's pardoned, he travels across the land to prisons for the condemned and forgotten, giving them hope and making them better by believing in them when they wouldn't believe in themselves. While not my favorite character, Tom's story arc is one that is near and dear to my heart years after playing it. Doing replays for projects has been great. While time-consuming, it allows for re-examination, different viewings on what you thought you once knew. Cole is such an example. When I first played, I thought Cole was fine. I couldn't click with the character, and he just faded in the background. This time, I found myself appreciating him. Cole is quite different from the other party members, primarily because he isn't mortal. He's a spirit, one of compassion. The body he inhabits is of an apostate who died alone in a cell, a kind of gift for the one who offered comfort before the lights went out. Originally, I thought it was strange for such a compassionate person. Cole was a rogue with the assassin subclass, but considering it another way, I get it. It's not about style, but efficiency, emerging from the shadows and finishing the job quickly before returning. It comes down to intention. A blade can cut down another for personal gain, but can also prevent the suffering of others, or offer peace to one in agony. The Inquisition doesn't quite understand him, and neither does he. In a setting, he could be considered an abomination, but that title doesn't do him credit. As a spirit, Cole is very empathetic and struggles to understand the mortal world. His interpretations are often quite black and white, following a straightforward logic. We should be helping people. Why are we doing this? He's also quite fun in conversations. Oftentimes, that lack of the mortal world leads to understandable interpretations that sound like a joke but are earnestly said, like someone saying, "Alright, I'm back," and he responds, "Hi back, I'm Cole." Combine that with his ability to peer into minds, asking questions that could be considered intruding on personal space with a poetry-like delivery, and it creates an uncertainty in the party. In cutscenes, I noticed a disconnect with Cole. I tried picking options to put him at ease and they didn't land. What I meant wasn't connecting. It wasn't anything wrong with him, just my approach. Cole's arc is similar to Iron Bull's, conflict between one side or another, but here these are given representatives. The effects with the Wardens have terrified him and demands Solas to bind him with an amulet, blocking others from doing so for bad intentions, but it doesn't have an effect. Cole's existence baffles the spirit expert, and that's when Varric returns to the script. He suggests Cole is becoming more human. This has never occurred before and is ultimately decided with your choice. When Cole's origin is revealed, confronting the Templar that forgot about the boy in the tower, you can agree with Solas's approach to forgive the man and lead towards his spirit origins, or Varric's approach to vent that anger and become more human. Solas's argument is solid. A spirit is happiest when acting on its purpose. Contradicting that is dangerous and will only lead to misery. Though I went with Varric's decision. Granted, I've got a mortal bias here, and combined with Varric's arc, he offers some great lines. First to Solas,
But he isn't a spirit, is he? He made himself human, and humans change. They get hurt, and they heal.
and then to Cole.
You can't make it all just go away. I learned that the hard way.
While he's not happy about the direction, Solas comes around to Cole's path. Something I note that gets talked about as much with these games is the party banter, and how it adds personal ties to a playthrough. Two companions trapped in a party and a conversation begins. It's not a big budget cutscene, but a verbal exchange, perhaps praising one's techniques, debating a topic, outright insulting someone with condescending jabs, or a casual question about how Quinari women are. I'm asking for a friend. Whatever it is, it's a small way to get to know characters better. The frequency and people chatting are unpredictable, but can have you endeared to a character. Doing this series of videos, I've been looking up these conversation compilations on YouTube, and always learned something new even with just one scene. During this recorded playthrough, while exploring the Exalted Plains, I had a conversation play that I'd like to share with you.
How are you, Cole? Do you feel better, now that you have dealt with the Templar?
I don't know. He hurt me, hurt the real Cole. I'm angry at him. I can't let that go. I have to become more. Let it make me real.
You may well become fully human after all. I never thought to see it.
When did you see it before?
I did not say that I had.
No, you didn't. It's harder to hear sometimes. Sorry.
Good luck, Cole. You have taken a difficult road.
Solas cares for Cole, cares for others too, even if he isn't inclined to believe it. And we'll get into that. Just not yet. I think the companions in Inquisition are quite strong. No idea how I'd place them ranking-wise, different enough to be interesting and doing their own thing. But this is where the complications come in. Because those arcs I talked about, those interesting moments with characters, those are their own quests and sections. My problem with Inquisition is that to get to those great moments, you need to engage with the open world stuff to gain power and progress. While I describe them here, making a meaty chunk of the video back to back, in-game this is a drip feed, tied with main story progression. While I have been enjoying the combat more than before, playing a Templar, buffing allies, and pulling enemies with my spin move, bandits, demons, dragons, you name it, it's not enough to be fully interested in that aspect of the game. Unfortunate, because that's most of what I do. That's a strong reason I find it more interesting to talk about the game than to play it. When you beat Corypheus, it's over. Check out these epilogues and thanks for playing. It's quite a sudden shift, but that got me curious about a question. If that's how I feel about the main game, how are the DLCs? Let's start with the one I haven't played before, The Descent. Check it out. I built this sweet-ass elevator. Well, not really, the organization did, but I commissioned it and thus will take the credit when asked to gain influence. What do you say we hop on? Don't look down. While all the races play a role in the Dragon Age series, I haven't thought much on the dwarves. That's a shame because they're quite interesting. One immediate example. They live down below with the stone and rock, the ground zero of Darkspawn. If the other cultures are dealing with demons, that's a rare occurrence. For the dwarves, it's another day of the week. When I think of a dungeon crawl in this setting, the deep roads are the immediate go-to. Underground tunnels connecting all across Thedas, housing half-forgotten remnants of old civilizations, demons, and secrets that are oftentimes better kept hidden. It's been a part of the series since the beginning, and The Descent puts that emphasis front and center. Sudden earthquakes begin affecting the lyrium trade, so the Inquisitor and their merry band look into it. Assisted by Volta, a chronicler of sorts called the Shaper, and Lieutenant Wren of the Legion of the Dead. The six of you will travel through the deep roads. The Descent is about what you find. I thought this was a great change of pace mechanically from the base game. Instead of a huge map to explore, the goal is to go deeper, level by level. While there are secrets to find, landmarks to view, mugs to collect, and bloody gears to open doors, it's linear, with paths to engage with that other content if you wish. While I appreciated the moments to pop around corners and check stuff out, the big thing that got me was the premise of traveling further down. One of the most exciting parts of the series is not just the plot beats or character moments for role-playing, but the slow reveals of the lore, foundations of knowledge that offer more than first expected. While we've been here before, it's so vast that you can't see it all by rediscovering one section. In Origins, there was the deep roads in the Orzammar section, and the combat DLC Golems of Amgarak showed off the Harvester. The Expedition in 2 heavily influenced future developments in Kirkwall. It's a place that has a huge impact, yet mysterious, indifferent to the outer world. There's something both exciting and terrifying about exploring past the bounds of what you know. Every step an uncertain advance deeper into the dark. Of course it's a video game, so I can subject my character to this fate, but that reminded me of a thought I had hiking back in the day. However far you go, you need to head back at some point. You can't be so far that you won't have the strength for the trip back to the car. And in the deep roads, oftentimes people don't focus on coming back. Take Ren for example, a hardened warrior, a part of the Legion. This group is quite similar to the Wardens, taking any dwarf for this purpose. The standout point is the intention for joining. Some to have family names restored or debts forgiven. That latter case is Ren's motivation. Before the member leaves Orzammar permanently, they get a funeral, one last celebration to spend with family and friends, saying final words and cracking open the mead. It's this ritual that cements the members are already dead, their previous lives gone, spent traveling the tunnels until their second death. It's this idea I find intriguing. While he's known Volta for a while and a part of the quest, he's going in knowing there's no happy ending for him. Regardless of what they find, as we travel deeper, he knows that just makes him closer to the stone. He also embodies that same crap, different nug mentality about this life. He and Volta will often have conversations while traveling, like coworkers. I hope we don't run into an emissary, Volta will say, traveling down a lift. Now we definitely will, he'll reply. There's a casualness to the whole thing with Ren, like that time his fellow Legion member swallowed Darkspawn blood and died after 3 days. That's just how it goes. Hi-ho. Speaking of Darkspawn, that's also something I enjoyed. With the deep roads, there's more of an emphasis here. An alpha ogre will make an aggressive return right at the beginning. And this next one is perhaps my favorite bit. Before the proper introduction with Ren, the goal is to take out enough Darkspawn so the Legion can collapse the tunnels. A bar fills up the more Darkspawn is killed. This highlights their strongest aspect, their overwhelming numbers. In the deep roads, they just keep coming. One dies and 3 more will show up. Dozens will be pouring in as the fight goes along. This fight, not a power fantasy, but a desperate defense to hold the line. The charges collapsing the whole is the solution, but it's a makeshift victory, impermanent. But currently, the best thing that could have happened. Best to get a move on. Okay, while we've got some distance, check this out. There's a delight in progressing through this, not just for the reveals, but location sense. There's tunnels, but also expansive openings. It's isolating yet beautiful in a haunting sense. Great to see, awful to be trapped in. But the real joy is near the final level, in the Bastion of the Pure. I had no idea what to expect here, and I was so impressed. The quest mentioned it's near the storm's coast, which made a lot of sense with the abandoned tunnels in that map, and seeing the waves crashing against the rocks here was a great reminder. The big thing that sold me was the lyrium. Check out how it's displayed. There are veins all about, and they're not like usual ore, they look like the organic kind. This is where the lore stuff comes in. In Varric's questline, Bianca reveals lyrium is alive. That's why it can get affected by the blight and become red. That means it's not just a mineral like the world believes. Through the descent, Volta is convinced the earthquakes are from a titan. This is not a guess out of nowhere, but from an old text predating the first blight. Perhaps that gets you to think, okay, somebody wrote an old book. Who cares? Where this gets a bit wacky is that this information was hidden away. Shapers are chroniclers of history, but they also decide which stories get told and which don't. Volta was demoted because she refused to erase a memory. This information on the Titans would likely be erased too, ergo why she's here, to uncover the truth. In the Bastion of the Pure, the Darkspawn have cleared out, and a new enemy type are the Shah Bratal, revered defenders. Dwarves sealed in ancient armors infused with lyrium, and as a memory further reveals, lyrium is the blood of Titans. This resource the entire world has been using is not a mineral, but another being's life force. How's that for a reveal? We've more in common with vampires than first assumed. On that final level of the wellspring, you see the Titan's beating heart, revealing the cause of the earthquakes, calling to see one of its children. This also means starting at the Bastion, we've been traveling through its remains. After discovering the Guardian, Volta uses magic, revealing a connection between the primordial figure just before the fight, and vowing to stay behind to better understand its song. We leave with more questions than answers, but the more you know, right? I've had my fill with this underground stuff. Let's head back to the surface. I want to brush up on some history. Professor of Orlais, Brem Kenrick, encourages the Inquisition to Frostback Basin, the resting place of the last known Inquisitor Ameritan. The story goes, he went dragon hunting and disappeared 800 years ago during 120 of the Divine Age. Information suggests there might be more to it. Where the Descent was a streamlined addition, Jaws of Hakkon returns to the design of the base game, offering a new region to explore. I thought it was enjoyable for this replay. The storyline was quite interesting, especially near the end, and while I'm not the biggest fan of the open world design, the substance did feel packed tighter and pretty quick. Near the expansion's end, I saw most of the regions and I only played a few hours. Visually, the basin has its own identity. While it's got forests similar to other areas like the Emerald Graves, the basin incorporates verticality with campsites on wood structures winding around trees, and the color palette incorporates some oranges and reds too. Ancient Tevinter ruins are covered in foliage, and a culture has replaced it, that being the Avar. The only other time I remember this group being directly shown was in the Fallow Marsh questline and the Judgment with Morven the Under. A cool part of this expansion is getting a better understanding of their culture. Stonebear Hold is your introduction besides combat. Located on the cliffs, one of your first views is a contest between the two tribes, one who follows the Lady of the Skies, the other the Jaws of Hakkon. There's the title. The Thane Sva Sunhair will gladly assist in the mission, but the Hakkonites will not be so kind. They're connected in a general sense, but not in their specific tribes. Hakkon Winter's Breath, in particular, is one of the Avar's 3 deities, and the Hakkonites plan to bring him back to the mortal world. What's learned hours later is that they've done it before. My favorite part of the expansion is the conversation with the Meriden. As you explore Frostback and uncover more information, a picture forms that's quite similar to yours. Duty has bound you both to your role, one that's accompanied by companions that the Inquisitor grows to appreciate their friendship and bickering, and perhaps falling in love with one. In an old Venatori fortress once sealed by a wall of ice, the elven mage kneels weakened. The Hakkonites have bound the soul of Hakkon to a dragon. The Emperor of Orlais sent a Meriden on a secret mission to destroy it, preventing panic that another was causing problems for the world, with it being the second Blight and all. Unfortunately, the Inquisitor wasn't able to slay Hakkon, so he bound it with his magic. When you talk to him, he has no idea how much time has passed. As the conversation progresses, you understand how the role swallowed a Meriden. History never knew him truly. Scholars had no idea he was an elven mage. They assumed he was human because that's how things went, or how he worshipped both the elven pantheon and Andraste. He'll bitterly remark, "I never wanted this job. Hunting demons was so much simpler than politics." The one snippet that gets me is this side quest to recover memories for increased stats. Near the beach, you'll hear how he misses Hem-Sharel. Did you know it was built by the elves? I sure didn't. A Meriden chooses to act even at the protest of his brothers because the people of Thedas must stand firm against the Darkspawn, and when Hakkon was slayed, he planned to assist. If you bring Solus along, he'll say this.
But he never returned, and the elves of the Dales ignored the second Blight. Less than 100 years later, that hostility turned to war and the elves lost their homeland again.
Scout Harding assists at parts of the adventure, and in the end she says, every time you're more than just a person to someone, you're also less than a person too. It's a quote that fits quite strongly with your Herald of Andraste. No matter how you feel about it, people will point and say that's what you are. Ironically, it's similar to how I view him. The symbol was more interesting than the person underneath. In a Meriden, you get a small moment with someone who gets it. His advice is pretty solid too.
Take moments of happiness where you find them. The world will take the rest.
Playing through this, I thought it was fitting for the current Inquisitor to take the torch regardless of it being the main quest objective. When I ran into that fight and saw him rock at level 25 against my 22 party, I was really expecting to get obliterated. Perhaps it was my overpowering gear or my accidental equipment synergy, using canine leather for cold resistant, but Hardwig's health bar was apathetic to the Avar god's blows. With the dragon dead, the expansion's wrapped up. It's only afterward I considered that while both the Descent and this one had interesting stories, delving into lore and adding extra challenges with great locations and music, there wasn't much in the way of narrative choices. The most I saw were from Jaws, with the quest having 2 options for completion or choosing what gets revealed to the public about a Meriden. But there's one last adventure for the Inquisitor, and I think it's the best one. Trespasser is the final act of Inquisition. Finishing the base game, I was surprised how suddenly it wrapped up. Corypheus is dead, last conversation with companions, perhaps a romance scene just like real life, then bam, epilogues and post-credits scene. If you can only play one DLC, I would strongly recommend Trespasser, but I'm not your dad, so you do as you please. Taking place 2 years after the Magister's death, the Inquisition returns to the Winter Palace for the Exalted Council to decide their fate. The people of Ferelden vote the organization goes, the job is done, hang up the swords and let go of the power obtained. While Orlais desires the group to continue, albeit with supervision of course. And did someone say they should be the ones to do it? Who had the courage to say what everybody was thinking? And here's a cool example of roles shifting. The Ferelden representative is Tegan from Origins. The guy who was your biggest help during the Redcliffe section, now he's the same guy insisting you disband, and his perspective makes total sense. Ultimately, no one knows what the Inquisition wants now that the apocalyptic crisis is over. Doing what's necessary was the same thing Loghain said, and what happened there? The Orlesian representative Cyril is actually from the Mark of the Assassin DLC from 2. The Inquisition had a hand in who ruled in Orlais, and that seemed to work out. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just keep a close eye on him. Ultimately, both kingdoms have the same concern: fear. No one knows what the Inquisition wants. It's got secrets that could ruin many and plenty of resources. What's to say that power won't be abused after the fighting is stopped? Either it's scaled down and supervised, or it doesn't exist altogether. Ironically, it's this last adventure that I can buy into the Inquisitor as their own character. The first part before the Council, they get to catch up with their companions, and the scenes are fun. While I haven't played it yet, the Citadel DLC for Mass Effect 3 seemed like a great inspiration for this part. Lighthearted moments with characters you've grown to love and say goodbye. My favorite has to be Iron Bowls. As the Chargers attempt to bring in a gift for their commander, your job is to stall, chatting about the kingdoms, history, your love for hitting stuff, anything. And only when you admit you give up, he says, "Oh, sure you can. They must have that thing more than halfway." Being Ben Hassarath makes a real surprise impossible. Yet he still feigns a reaction because he knows how much it means to them. I think it says a lot about him as a person. While as a representative of the Qun, I wasn't as invested, knowing the paths you turned down and finding peace in that, however imperfect the outcome, had me really believe in him as a character. As the adventure progressed, I could also buy into the Inquisitor's frustration, first with choices made during the campaign turned against him. Then the Quinari body shows up in the palace in a working Alluvian close by, revealing an invasion by the Qun and how spies infiltrated the Inquisition to make this happen. The Council isn't happy about that too, especially trying to solve that problem on your own. And then there's the Anchor. The very thing cementing you as the Herald begins to act up, no longer a boon, but a liability. In Jaws of Hakkon, while exploring the island, the Inquisitor reels in pain from the mark, granting a new ability before carrying on. In Trespasser, the mark progresses. First, it's Anchor Discharge. As the focus bar builds, it lights the room and allows the party to dip into the Fade, immune to damage for a very short time. Then Anchor Blast. Now it hurts foes. The animation changes to show the force of this ability, until concluding with Anchor Meltdown. The bar fills faster, and if the Inquisitor doesn't use it before reaching full, they're pulled into the air like Corypheus grabbing them in Haven, unleashing at full blast, hurting foes and allies alike. I think what cements me seeing the Inquisitor as a character here is not just the narrative complexity, the very thing the player has been working towards leading to this conflict, but also how the mark affects you in gameplay, no longer being just a cool power, but a danger, one that could just as easily kill the party than opponents. In these points, the Inquisitor and I were right on the same page. Stop the invasion, the Dragon's Breath plan, and confront the agent of Fen Harel. And right at the end, when the Alluvian takes you deeper into the Elven ruins, you are alone with him. But the agent part is unnecessary. Solus as a party member was enigmatic. The Fade and Dalish expert always played his cards close to his chest, but the help he offered was sincere. He wanted you to fix the world, and he would stand by you no matter what. To keep the game fresh, I added a trial to my playthrough, an additional challenge that makes the game harder and offers an extra chance of rewards. The one I picked was Fairweather Friends. Any negative approval with companions is doubled. If it's too much, the companions grow frustrated with you and may leave the Inquisition. For a good chunk of my playthrough, Solus and I did not get along. I picked dialogue options I thought were genuine questions, and the Inquisitor would speak them with such venom. We'd argue about how I was running things. And it's also quite funny that Solus pointed the Herald to Skyhold after Haven's destruction, and my first act as Inquisitor is to found it on faith in a human god, and I can just picture his hands over his shiny egg-shaped head going, "I have made a huge mistake." Yet he never left. Even when I pissed him off, he would ready up anytime I needed him, only doing so once Corypheus was dealt with, because that conflict has a closer tie than first expected. If you've been following the series, you already know who Solus is. It's a huge part in the marketing for Veilguard, the elven god of lies, trickery, and rebellion, Fen Harel, the Dreadwolf. While it was stated in a post-credits scene with Flemeth, in Trespasser it's shared with your character, and if you do some extra investigating, you can come to that conclusion before you're told. This reveal works in two different ways. Way number one, you son of a bitch, Solus. The Dreadwolf has been mentioned constantly in the series. This is just a name, an additional piece to the lore. Then suddenly it becomes more here. If you experienced it blind, it's a twist that catches you by surprise. The wolf being disguised as a sheep the whole time. And way number two, you son of a bitch, Solus. If you already knew this, it makes his character so much more interesting, because every one of his comments and actions has new meaning. Since he caused the whole anchor mishap and knew how it worked, of course he'd help you close the breach. And notice how he guides you before exchanging words. Wow, you know a lot about the Veil, Solus. Of course he would. He created it. That was a great call at Skyhold, man. That really saved us. No kidding, Morgan. This place was frequently visited by elves at the height of their civilization. Remember centuries ago when I mentioned my party for Here Lies the Abyss? For the mage, the nightmare speaks in ancient Elvish, and Solus calmly replies. At the moment, I didn't think anything of it. On this replay, I was curious and decided to look it up. While I've seen the specific wording vary, the general conversation goes something like this. Learn your lesson, trickster. Your victory is nothing. Your pride leads to your death. Nothing is certain. Another detail is how he lies, not directly but by omission. He'll give you answers when questions are asked, just not the whole truth. And if you know what to look for, he'll accidentally give himself away. After Hemshirel, I'd forgotten how I'd miss court intrigue. You miss court intrigue? When were you at court? Oh, well, never directly, of course. An elven apostate is rarely invited to speak with empresses and kings, but from the Fade, I've watched dynasties and empires crumble. And perhaps the funniest one in hindsight that Morgan will mention in Veilguard. When exploring the Temple of Mythal, she'll tag along as your elven expert. If you take solace, it's hilarious, as she's trying to piece together the history and connection of the Dreadwolf statue, and the literal god it's about is a few feet away, especially when she mocks his well of knowledge on the subject. And just for that, Morgan, I'm slurping the bathwater.
No!
This is stellar writing. A good twist is one that recontextualizes what came before, foreshadowing subtle clues that pay off in the moment, and can be appreciated when experienced again, like taking apart a machine and seeing all the components that made it work effectively. Regardless of which camp you fall into, this reveal and scene is the climax of the game. And years ago, when I saw someone upload it to YouTube, this is what got me to play through the game, past all the parts I wasn't a fan of. That's how good this scene is, because it's one that varies depending on your view of Solas. If you aren't close to him like I was this playthrough, it might just be eh. If you both hated each other, it could be really funny. All his motivations and reveals get condensed in a few sentences and then leaves. But if you took the time to know him, whether as a friend or a romance option, this scene is dramatic in the best kind of way. Because he's still the person you grew to care about, the sass, the wit, the compassion. That's all there. He's not corrupted and acting against his will or was pretending to be an entirely different person. He always was and has been Solas. Ages ago, when the elves were immortal, the people known to be the elven gods, also called the Evanurs and Dalish, were incredibly powerful spellcasters. When Mythal, the goddess of love and often seen as the best of them, was murdered, Solas created the Veil, splitting the mortal world and the Fade, banishing them. But as you learn traversing the Alluvians, this doomed the elves. It stole their immortality and greatly weakened their magic. By the time he awoke in 940 of the Dragon Age, he realized what he'd done and sought to fix it. With grim determination as his guide, he sent an agent to give Corypheus the Orb of Destruction, hoping the Magister would unlock it with his death and then use the anchor to tear down the Veil and return the world back to normal, at the cost of Thetis' destruction. When Corypheus survived, learning immortality on his own, he decided to help the Inquisition get it back. And when it was broken, he left, returning to Flemeth, the current host of Mythal, killing her and obtaining her former mentor's essence for the mission. This is a huge reason why he gets mad about the Well of Sorrows stuff, because whoever drinks it becomes a servant to Mythal, giving information you shouldn't know, such as the password for Fen'Harel's Trusted early in this expansion. By leaving the Quinari's body at the palace, it was a chance for you to save the world for what time remains. And this conversation is his chance to save you, because the Mark will kill you unless he takes it away, and your arm with it, whether because your death would be senseless or because he truly cares for you. It's that latter reason that I cherish about this scene. I mentioned in my Origins video that I love when characters make choices that are consistent with their headspace. Even if they contrast the players, by their logic, this is the best course of action and makes them feel nuanced. They're not a yes man, they're a character. Solas is a dynamic character. He knows he'll pay for his hubris and still chooses to fix his mistakes, even if it hurts everyone he's close to. And that final bit is the song. Trevor Morse's work on Inquisition really brings the setting alive. My personal favorites are the main theme, Orlays, a good chunk of the tavern songs like O Grey Warden, Rise, Sarah Was Never, and Empress of Fire. But his work in Trespasser is on a whole other level. Fall of the Magister is a great addition. Dark Solas and Lost Elf? It's like the maker came down from the Golden City and gave you a big ol' smooch. It's some of my favorite music I've heard. Fantastic pieces by themselves, but incredible with context. Because the songs are about the same person, they share similarities but have different tones, comparable to the fear and salvation a title Inquisitor invokes. Dark Souls focuses on the intensity, the drums and brass instruments convey the power of the conflict, loud and heroic as the Dreadwolf wages war against the Evanuris, and your Inquisitor as your allies fight against the invading Quinari. Hartwig, the USB, please. Meanwhile, Lost Elf is melancholic. The imposing sound is stripped away for piano and strings in this intimate moment, as your friend mournfully declares the path he must walk, not as an imposing title, but as a man who seeks to correct a mistake, offering parting words and saving the only one to make him doubt the goal. It's so perfect. As time has gone along, I've been hesitant about games going for a more cinematic approach, oftentimes the best moments being the ones you passively watch. When I see stuff like this, blending the player's interactions with the presentational flair of film, I can understand the appeal. I get swept up in this moment every time, because Solas wasn't just my Inquisitor's friend, he was a companion I enjoyed, even knowing his origin. When I experienced this scene firsthand, I was all in. I needed to know what happened next. It wasn't the gameplay, or the lore, or the locations that sold me on a new Dragon Age game. I wanted to know how I was going to help my Inquisitor's friend. At the expansion's end, when my Inquisitor declared their intention to the Council, I remembered the strongest experience was when I disbanded the Inquisition, hung up the master-crafted weapon with a smaller band to find Solas. A lot of that stemmed from a real-life comparison I saw years ago in an extra credits video. It's a document I'd like to read to you. Can a computer make you cry? Right now, no one knows. This is partly because many would consider the very idea frivolous, but it's also because whoever successfully answers this question must first have answered several others. Why do we cry? Why do we laugh, or love, or smile? What are the touchstones of our emotions? Until now, the people who asked such questions tended not to be the same people who ran software companies. Instead, they were writers, filmmakers, painters, musicians. They were, in the traditional sense, artists. We're about to change that tradition. The name of our company is Electronic Arts. Software worthy of the minds that use it. We are a new association of electronic artists united by a common goal, to fulfill the enormous potential of the personal computer. In the short term, this means transcending its present use as a facilitator of unimaginative tasks and a medium for blasting aliens. In the long term, however, we can expect a great deal more. These are wondrous machines we have created, and in them we can see a bit of their makers. It is as if we had invested them with the image of our minds, and through them we are learning more and more about ourselves. We learn, for instance, that we are more entertained by the involvement of our imaginations than by passively viewing and listening. We learn that we are better taught by experiences than by memorization, and we learn that the traditional distinctions, the ones that are made between art and entertainment and education, don't always apply towards the language of dreams. In short, we are finding that the computer can be more than just a processor of data. It is a communication medium, an interactive tool that can bring people's thoughts and feelings closer together, perhaps closer than ever before. And while 50 years from now, its creation may seem no more important than the advent of motion pictures or television, there is a chance it will mean something more. Something along the lines of a universal language of ideas and emotions. Something like a smile. The first publications of Electronic Arts are now available. We suspect you'll be hearing a lot about them. Some of them are games like you've never seen before, that get more out of your computer than other games ever have. Others are harder to categorize, and we like that. Watch us. We're providing a special environment for talented, independent software artists. It's a supportive environment in which big ideas are often given room to grow, and some of America's most respected software artists are beginning to take notice. We think our current work reflects this very special commitment, and though we are few in number today and a part of the mainstream of the mass software marketplace, We are confident that both time and vision are on our side. Join us. We see farther. This is an advertisement from Electronic Arts published in 1983, decades before it got voted the worst company in America 2 years in a row from 2012 to 2013 by thelateconsumerist.com, before the release of the other Star Wars Battlefront 2 that led to a class action lawsuit in 2017 with its loot boxes, and before it got its current reputation as a publishing villain in the games industry. When I read this, I see a company excited and passionate to push the bounds and elevate the medium to something more. Perhaps that mission changed along the way. I certainly couldn't tell you when. Heck, I wasn't even born when this was written. But I do know that having too much influence can change a person, and not always for the better. Intentions get perverted with justifications until only a hollow shell is left. Congratulations, you've made it to the top. And all it took was your soul to do it. That's why humility is so important. Not for appearance's sake. Regardless of what's accomplished, you're human just like the rest of us. Take a bow after your 15 minutes and let go gracefully. The Inquisition has been shown to be corrupt, not just from outside influence. I exploited it too. The Blackwall scenario was an immediate example. I can rationalize my choices, but with the goal concluded, I couldn't think of a good reason to continue, even with the soulless conflict. It seemed like a band-aid to a much deeper problem in the organization. And another reason stems from my own thought process. If I truly was running the Inquisition or handling a huge amount of influence, would I be able to let go of it so easily because I think it's the right thing to do? I'd like to say yes. Perhaps doing so in a virtual medium I've invested over 100 hours in makes me believe I could, but I can't be certain. You never know until you try. But the whole idea goes back to the main thing. Inquisition is complicated. It's a game I admire for its world building and writing, how it got me to consider questions about myself and seeing the world, how its characters are interesting and distinct, its beautiful music and look that brings the setting to life. It's a game I have a lot of respect for even if I don't like playing it. And even at this game's end, I forgot how exciting the build-up for the next title was. Knowing how it turned out, I think Inquisition did a lot right, and I respect the game quite a bit for its excitement and fun it gave in spending time in Thedas. Regardless of your feelings for that title, thank you so much for watching. This was a huge project putting this together, and I am grateful for your time in experiencing it. Take care of yourself, drink plenty of water, and I'll see you around.